right? Or am I jumping the gun?
Yeah, 6.
2 minutes.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. I'm calling the Monday, February 12th, 2024 Select Board meeting to order. First of all, as anybody who's looked at the agenda tonight, I just want to say a huge thank you to John and our town staff for putting together this agenda. There are a number of significant big items on this agenda, and I know a lot of work went into putting this together, so thank you. Also, because it is such a packed agenda, I'm going to ask that any public comment on issues be limited to 2 minutes so that we can get through this. We've got substantial issues we need to get through, and anybody who wants to submit anything in writing, we read those, we take that into account and consider it. So we're not precluding our public from communicating with us, but we just have to be realistic about how much all of us can do in one evening. So the first item is a public hearing for the Farmstead Special Amusement Application. John, do you want to?
So this is really just the opportunity. The Farmstead is the building that also houses the flatbread company. And so this is Alan and Marge Mitchell's. They do events. They have an event space that's attached to that same building. And so this special amusement application is a public hearing we'll do annually to make sure that they are allowed to use that space for small band. There's, I think, 2 or 3 person band they mentioned, small dance space. So.
Okay. Is anybody here from Farmstead Amusement?
I don't see anybody.
Okay. All right.
No.
Any public comment related to this particular item? Okay, with that, I close the hearing on the Farmstead application. And what I would like to do is just get it off our agenda, if we could have a vote to approve this application.
I move the board approve the Farmstead Special Amusement application as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay. Great. All right. Next on the agenda is the town manager's report.
So I'll just do something verbal. I do have something written, but I'm going to send that out later on. I'm just going to try to hit a couple of key points, and there's a lot that's on the board's agenda, but let's talk about some things that aren't on the board's agenda. Mostly, I want it to be noticed that on March 5th, so before the board's next meeting, will be the presidential primary, and the first election that will be actually held in this space. So the election space that everyone's used to going over to the town office and winding your way through the Richardson room, that space will no longer be able to be used for that, for voting, and will be relocated to this space. So it'll be a different layout. Obviously, parking, you'll need to be mindful of those parking issues. This is a presidential primary, so there are particular aspects of this which are unique to this particular election, because some changes have come into the law to allow those who are of unenrolled status to vote in the primary of a political party. So if you were an unenrolled person, you could choose to select a ballot to vote in the Democratic primary. Or if I were unenrolled, I could choose to vote in the Libertarian primary, if one exists. This is a new change in state law that allows for this. However, if you are a Democrat, you cannot vote in the Republican primary. So if you're unenrolled, you have options. If you are enrolled, you don't. You have the time, I believe, has now passed. I'm sorry. You can vote, you can change your enrollment as of the 16th. So we have till the end of this week where you could change your enrollment if you want to participate in one of the primaries. Obviously, seemingly things are somewhat headed down a road we're familiar with in this country in terms of who will be on the ballot, but who am I to say you can't vote? So this is an opportunity, and this will obviously a bit of a change from what we've done in past years. So I want people to be mindful of that. On that day, they'll be coming over here. The library won't be open for regular hours. We'll be really just working through. Staff upstairs will be working at the polls as well, and trying to make this work as well as we can. So
For those of you concerned about parking, there is early voting allowed now. You can go into the town office, fill a ballot out there, request an absentee ballot, take one home, get it done before that date. And that cuts off, it doesn't go all the way up till March 5th. It's the Thursday before March 5th that you can no longer vote early.
And it's really any reason. You don't have to have an emergent reason. After that Thursday, you have to have an emergent reason why you'd be able to draw an absentee ballot. So, all of a sudden, there was an earthquake or, locusts came and I can't vote on Tuesday. That might be eligible. But if there's other reason, like, I just don't want to show up with the polls on Tuesday, and you come in on Friday, that's not going to work. So that's not in the spirit of the law or the law itself. So what we're going to want is you to, obviously, if you have any reason before, that Thursday before, you can come in and get an absentee ballot. In fact, you can vote right in the lobby right now. So it's very quick and easy, and it's a quiet time of the year to come in the office, too. There's not a lot of people coming in and out, so you can get in, get out, and be on your way. So,
Quick question.
Yeah.
Does everybody know why the voting is going to be happening here this time?
I don't know.
It's because of construction, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
Most people might not understand that.
Good point. You're right. So, especially we've got a big crowd here tonight, so.
And online.
Yeah, right. So there'll be construction in the Richardson Room space, carving that space into some office spaces. We have two people who are working in the space for one person right now, and we're gonna be moving them into that Richardson Room space for offices. So it's been in the budget for a couple of years, and we finally have enough funding to pull that off. So that hopefully that will be it's a little bit like working out of bunk beds. That's not really the most ideal circumstance for anyone. So thanks for Michael. I appreciate that.
Anything else?
Yeah, just one other thing I wanted to mention, which is, I lost it here, I just had my notes. Good news. So, after almost 2.5 years of waiting, the town has finally received its permit from the Army Corps of Engineers to complete the work over on Robinson Drive. So it's not done. Anyone watching on Robinson Drive, it's still not done, I'm sorry. But this has been the red tape of all red tapes. So we're gonna have to, there'll be some steps that the board will have to take. The purchase of the property where we'll be using as access, we'll need to set a date for a meeting as well as a special town meeting, because the purchase of that property will require a special town meeting for that expenditure. And that will be, so I would say probably sometime in the next 6 weeks, we'll be moving ahead on that. So, but it's very exciting news. This has been a very, very, very long time, far longer than I would have ever anticipated, and certainly those who live on Robinson Drive would have ever anticipated. But I'm very happy to see that finally there is an end to that saga. So there is some tree cutting, some general tree cutting going on around town. Main Street is the predominant area. So if you see crews out and you're headed out Main Street, headed up to Simon's Corner into town, that's where some brush cutting and tree cutting are going on right now to try to prep for the summer work. So I'll keep the rest of it in writing, and everyone can read it. If there's questions, feel free to let me know.
Okay, great. Thanks, Don. Next is public input on non-agenda items. Next, amendments to the agenda. Yes.
Public input on non-agenda items. I know that I wrote a letter to John January 20th, and I know that he was not able, for whatever reason, to put it in your material. Maybe he did now.
He did provide it to us.
I would like to acknowledge, to have the acknowledgement from you that you received it.
We have received it, and I appreciate that. We're going to, in the consent agenda, we'll talk about that. Thank you. Okay, amendments to the agenda. One suggestion we had was we have a discussion at the end of the meeting about the wastewater recovery facility, And that's a pretty important issue and one that we don't want everybody to just be exhausted by the time we get to that. So I would suggest we move that up. We've got a number of folks from the Harbor Committee, so I don't know if any of you want to stay and listen to the WRF discussion, or if we should do the Harbor Committee work first, and then we would go to the WRF right after that. You guys, I just want to be respectful of people's time, that you've taken evenings to come to our meeting and present important information to us, and I don't want to move things up on the agenda that further lengthen the amount of time you have to be here. So that's my only reason for asking the question. Okay, well, unless anybody objects, if we would move that to basically following action item F, which is the Act on Commercial Use Policy, and then we'll go to the WRF discussion. Okay, consent agenda. And I think it's important to note here, the consent agenda includes a committee resignation from Marcia Steinglass, who served on the Comprehensive Plan Committee, and Craig Wilson, who was on the Recreation Committee. And we appreciate both the service of our community volunteers for those committees. Okay, do we have a motion for the consent agenda?
I move the board approve the consent agenda as amended.
Or presented? Are we amending it?
Oh, the consent agenda, sorry.
As presented.
Presented.
Okay, great.
Second.
Second, Eric?
Yep.
Great. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, good. Okay, then we have a committee application for Russell Fitzpatrick for the Recreation Committee. Is Russell here?
No, Russell couldn't make
Okay.
it.
Okay. Sounds like from his application, he's very involved and engaged at the ball fields and wants to be a participant. He would essentially be replacing Craig Wilson, whose resignation we just accepted. So do we have a vote for Russell?
I move the board approve Russell Fitzpatrick's application for the Recreation Committee for the term ending June 2026.
Okay. Second?
Second.
And any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, great. Next is Act on Economic Development Committee Work Plan. Is there anybody here from the Economic Development Committee? Okay. We have a work plan that was provided by the Economic Development Committee that's in the agenda materials. And I know that, Ryan, do you want to make any comments on that work plan? Is that something you've worked with them on?
Hi there. So I wasn't at their meeting. I had another appointment, but if you had any specific questions, I did meet with Deborah Hall, the chair of that committee, afterwards to recap that meeting. So if you had any specific questions on it, I can answer that.
So you see the work plan, and that looks to you like an appropriate scope of work for our
Yeah,
Economic
it looks like an
Development
appropriate scope of work for them, yes.
Committee? Okay, great. Do we have a motion on the work plan?
I move the board approve the work plan for the Economic Development Committee as presented.
Second, Jim? Okay.
Yeah.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Great. And thanks to the Economic Development Committee, we really appreciate the work that they're doing. And I know a piece of their work plan, which we'll discuss later, is to work with the comprehensive plan and provide input on economic development for Rockport. All right, now we're to act on Harbor Committee work plan. So we have a work plan, and then I guess I would ask Sam if you want to come up and talk about the Harbor Committee work plan.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, so you want, the work plan is a modest 4 points that I think you guys have, but do you want me to talking?
Yeah, why don't you just run
Yeah.
through that, but then I think the letter of intent was
Sure.
the more substantive piece of,
Sure, yeah, so our work plan is sea level resilience planning in collaboration with the Conservation Commission. Fee schedule and budget review, which is an annual item. Monitor effectiveness of the Harbor Committee and Parks Committee joint management structure, and submit the letter of intent as requested by the town manager.
okay. Should we move on to the letter of intent, or does anybody have questions about the work plan itself? Okay,
Yeah. So, yeah, this letter of intent is really a rework of the work we did for the comp plan in '21. So, I can read it. These are the well-considered intentions of the Rockport Harbor Committee. 1, encourage working waterfront activities such as commercial fishing and other marine trades, such as commercial diving, mooring maintenance, boat building, boat repair, and clean aquaculture activities. 2, retain flexible use industrial waterfront space to accomplish crane service, loading of traps or other fishing gear, heavy equipment access, and parking for working waterfront uses. Subcategory there. The space is well utilized on the east side of the Goose River. The space should not be utilized for parking or any non-marine use. 3, provide equitable recreational access to town property, including but not limited to mooring holders, picnickers, recreational fishing, and kayakers. 4, where space is constrained, Rockport residents should have priority of use, including to obtain moorings and dinghy space. 5, the town should allow commercial use of its marine park floats in a way that does not disrupt recreational use. 6, ability to access boat launch is a priority. 7, the Conservation Commission should govern environmentally sensitive topics. Generally, non-permeable surfaces are much preferred. The dark skies ordinance is to be strictly followed for aesthetics as well as impacts on the ecosystem and fisheries. In construction below sea level, inclined slopes are preferred over vertical bulkheads for lower long-term cost and improved resiliency. 8, public events at the harbor are encouraged. 9, public use of the harbor should be prioritized. Private events at the harbor should not inhibit public use. 10, the Rockport Boat Club, while a private club, is encouraged to continue as chartered. 11, the youth sailing program should be particularly encouraged. And then I have, to accomplish the intentions of the Harbor Committee recommends the following priorities and actions. 1, paving, light installations, or other development should not be undertaken without the consult of the Conservation Commission and Harbor Committee. 2, do not pave the area on the east side of the Goose River. 3, acknowledge the importance of the area on the east side of the Goose River as fundamental for working waterfront. 4, enforce traffic rules that allow working waterfront access to Main Street. 5, continue to replace fender pilings with CCA or Greenheart piles rather than red oak. 6, add riprap below the bulkhead facing south of the Harbor Master Building. 7, maintain Main Street to a reasonable standard. 8, enforce the harbor ordinances. 9, allocate the majority of dinghy space to mooring holders while making space available to non-mooring holders as well.
that's
So,
great, thank
Yeah,
you.
that's the letter. It goes on to cite a motion that we made in 2019, again on the theme of preserving the space on the east side of the Goose River. That motion reads, the Rockport Harbor Committee recommends that the area described thus below, and there's a map, be designated for marine, commercial, and recreational use of the harbor, and further recommends that the comprehensive plan consider this space essential for Rockport's marine, commercial, and recreational waterfront.
Okay. I see Orion nodding, so he's got that message for the comp plan.
Yeah.
So are there questions? for Sam? It's a nice thorough
Service of
overview.
light.
Thank you for taking the time, and I know it does take time to do these kinds of things.
John brought us that letter of intent idea. I have the sense that you would have liked to have seen it in the work plan. Our sense of the work plan was that it was meant to be more the boilerplate. But if you guys want to guide us further on that, we'd be happy to hear it.
I would be inclined to sort of attach it as part of the work plan, because it just gives fuller scope to the ideas and where the committee, what you think of important issues at the harbor, and I think that's important for us to be aware of.
Yep.
Cheryl?
I think, first of all, all of us here tonight are here because we're, engaged in the town, and I think there's general agreement that the ability to have these volunteer committees to participate in governance is highly valued. But it's hard.
Oh, I think you need to get to a microphone, sorry. Nobody at home can hear you. And if you don't mind introducing yourself.
I don't know how close or far to be, but in terms of the committees, including our own, having that input and communicating with the select board, I think there are a number of challenges that are sort of highlighted by, the conversation about the work plan. One is that these committees are variously discussing similar issues day to day or meeting to meeting in terms of management. So I think we had sort of thought of the work plan as something that highlights larger scale projects. And if that's not the case, I think it helps to get this clarification. But with respect to formulating things like 5-year plans or larger scope, I think the Harbor Committee has found it difficult to do that without a comprehensive plan.
Mhm.
And frustrating, actually, bluntly. And I found myself today going back to the 2004 plan and looking at how much of what we've articulated recently actually builds on the 2004 plan, but what a need there is for something new. We held a dedicated workshop to provide input on the comp plan now 3 years ago, and sort of are still feeling like there isn't a coordinated vision that would help the Harbor Committee move forward with larger goals. So I just want to put that out there. I also noticed in this process that there are at least a dozen of these committees. The Harbor Committee is one. All of them have charters that were, I think, aligned in 2021 that included things like the obligation to post regularly, publicly, not only the agenda, but the minutes of meetings.
Mhm.
And I find that only 3 committees among more than 12 are doing that. And they are the Harbor Committee, the Conservation Committee, and the Planning Board.
Oh, I think Parks Committee, Library Committee, I know those minutes are,
Yeah, I'd love to see that,
Okay.
because I did look at that and I couldn't find them. I could find the agendas, but I couldn't find the minutes. And maybe they're being, posted elsewhere. I'm looking in the wrong.
maybe there's a gap in how they're,
They're not posted.
Yeah, so they're actually not being, there's limited value to posting the agendas without the minutes to sort of let us all know what committees are doing, or let you know, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm just putting that out there as food for thought in this process.
okay,
That makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
totally agree with that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And we will be discussing the comprehensive plan more later tonight, but no one is more frustrated than many of us on the committee as to where we are, so. Thank you. I really.
Sure.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is designating parking for commercial fishermen?
Is there designated parking for commercial fishermen? Yes.
You're not going away with those, then,
No.
okay?
No, I think they want that to retain,
No, they-
retained.
We've been fighting for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of the, what the committee sees is that the space actually functions quite well, and it's better utilized than I think most people see. The commercial fishermen tend to use it early and, until a little after lunch or something like that, and, then it clears out and there's sort of another crowd, and, it doesn't actually come, the boat club uses a lot of, space on Friday evenings, and, it works pretty well.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want me to stick around for the?
Yeah, the rules and regs.
Rules and regulations?
Yeah.
Sure.
I think by way of introducing that, I mean, there's obviously a lot of good substance that's in the regulations. There was the provision dealing with the vendors in the Harbor Committee rules and regulations, and then we had the commercial use policy that was from the sort of Parks and Rec, or Parks and Beautification Committee, ostensibly having met with Harbor Committee, and as John and I looked at that, it looked like there was a lot of overlap between the commercial use policy and things in the Harbor Committee rules and regs, and it seemed like it would make more sense to just put the aspects of the commercial use policy into the harbor rules and regs and not have a separate commercial use policy. So that's what's in the agenda packet, is we have showing sort of red line, really a few suggested revisions to the harbor rules and regs, really just clean up things. And then this sort of incorporating the commercial use policy into that. Did everybody have a chance to look at those? Or
I saw through that.
So is one the marked up copy, then the second one is a cleaned up copy?
Or,
Yeah, the clean copy with it all.
And then there's,
or prior to revision.
Maybe, John, you want to explain what?
So, so not to go back to the beginning of time, but around approximately a year ago, both the Harbor Committee and members of the Parks Beautification Committee met. Through that conversation, a letter was generated, a letter that was meant to reflect the shared ground that both parties felt was a fair way of governing what can and cannot happen in Marine Park, okay? And that conversation, it turned into a letter. There was a draft that Doug Cole had drafted. He shared it with Sam. Sam had some edits back, and they sent it collaboratively. That letter then ended up back before the board. This is a summation of that conversation. Meanwhile, and I would say probably it was this time a year ago, but it's been some time that the Harbor Committee has been working and talking about the harbor rules. I don't know exactly when that started, but it's been some time that Harbor Committee has been engaged in looking at this document. Concurrently, and you'll see on the agenda here, there's a commercial use policy. So what the Parks and Beautification Committee did is they took that letter and they wanted to turn that into policy and turn it into commercial use policy, which is governing some of the same areas that are covered by the harbor rules. So the problem is both of these things coming to land at the same time for the board, it puts a little bit of a difficult circumstance before everybody, because we could talk about one thing and dealing with one committee and then shut off our brains and turn off the other part of the brain and then say, okay, now we're going to deal with the commercial use policy. But we're talking about, in some cases, the same area. So I know that the Harbor Committee did look at what the commercial use policy said, and the draft, the second of the two drafts here, is the draft that came from the Harbor Committee, not the one with the red line with the plein air painting and all that. Those were additions that were taken from the commercial use policy. So, I mean, Sam can certainly describe the Harbor Committee's discussions as to why they went where they went in terms of their discussion. But what we have before you is two committees who are saying not the same thing, but variations of covering the same area. And the problem is this is one body. You're
But
one body.
I think substantively, it's the same thing, isn't it?
I think
don't?
in many cases.
Unless I'm missing something.
But what I was trying to get at is that you're gonna ask whether it's me or it's Abby or, whomever to govern in terms of the town, there's one party that has to oversee that. So that's where, at least having the conversation in the same document, if you say, let's go with the simpler version, you can say go with the simpler version, but I'd rather have one document rather than two documents that are maybe saying the same things, but saying them a little bit differently. Is that a good way to, that's sort of the way that,
That's what I took, my takeaway from
Yeah.
reading them, but.
But I don't want to distract from what the Harbor Committee had said, because that was, they looked at this and I'll let Sam talk, but I think they, liked what the draft that they had come up with largely. And I think there were no changes after you had reviewed the commercial use policy. Am I right in saying that? You saw it and sort of said, okay, we like where we are on that. And if I'm putting words in your mouth, just say so, yeah.
So, yes, we had a meeting. We, I think, agree on sort of the substance of the conversation, which is that, all commercial uses, and I think the way we wrote it was all multi-day commercial uses need to get a permit, and all those permit applications should be run by, the committees, both committee chairs for review as to whether their committee wanted to make a recommendation on them. So each committee would have the option to, bring the use before it and say yes or no, or, or one committee might say, this isn't us, you guys deal with the park bench, that's not our area. So I think we're agreed on that, and we had quite a simple paragraph that accomplished that. The feeling of the Harbor Committee in general is that the Parks Committee views the Marine Park as, would like the Marine Park to be a little more static than the Harbor Committee sees it. The Harbor Committee is pretty open to, my sense, and somebody from the Parks Committee could correct me if I'm wrong, but my sense is the Harbor Committee is a little more open to a miscellany of uses. And what I see in this redlined copy, is the Parks Committee document that's been put here. I think the first two paragraphs under policy are the meat of it. The third paragraph that starts current permitted commercial uses, subject to review should include. I think should and current permitted are sort of contradictory, and the word should is, could set us up for problems later. Do we mean to say that, yoga is okay, but another exercise isn't, or kayak's okay, but not rowboats, I would strike that. I don't see what good it does.
Can I ask a very, very fundamental question, because I'm confused. There are two drafts in our packet, right? The redlined one was done by
Yeah,
We just-
Parks.
It just,
the
yeah.
Parks Committee?
Well, it's
The red lines
That's what I'm trying-
represent the Parks Committee document, superimposed on the harbor
Yeah,
rules.
so under the vendor section, that's the
Right.
commercial use policy that
So in our packet, the second one that has no redlining in it
is the original.
That's
Harbor
what
was
Committee.
the
Harbor
original
Committee.
one that the Harbor
Right.
Committee did.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Yeah, and we were just trying, I think at this point, trying to see how we could incorporate the commercial use policy that a fair amount of work went into. But listening, it's harbor rules and regs, and,
The definitions, I don't feel very strongly about that. It strikes me as sort of staking territory where I think the intent of the first piece of it is, look, we're both going to get a chance to look at whatever we want. So
Mm-hmm.
You know, if the Parks Committee feels like schooner sailing interferes with park benches, have at it, and vice versa.
Yeah, so I guess we have a couple options.
Mm-hmm.
We could, I don't think there's anybody here from the Parks Committee.
No.
And I don't feel like we should be adopting the commercial use policy,
Mhm.
because that does sort of tromp on
Mhm.
what's already in the rules and regulations, the proposed rules and regulations from the Harbor Committee. So that would just create a very awkward situation. And I'm not sure the Parks, I can't speak for the Parks Committee in terms of, I mean, I see the point.
I think they'll find, so
Yeah.
we had a long discussion about it at the Harbor Committee meeting the last time. And I
Mhm.
think they'll find that, although it doesn't state each individual one, which, correct me if I'm wrong, we all felt to be problematic,
Yeah.
as Sam said. But I think it all reaches the same goal in much more succinct way. And so I think everyone felt like it's accomplishing the same thing. It's
Yeah.
it's in the document where everyone's going to look for it, rather than, like John said, creating a new document that would live in somewhere funny.
Somewhere weird. that
in a
nobody
weird
would-
spot,
would
yeah,
forget
that would
about
be-
later and.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think,
Okay.
I'm not sure how, but I think it does accomplish the same.
Yeah, and the
same
key is
thing
that the
with less words.
Parks and Harbor would overlap when there is sort of an overlapping question. I mean, I think,
Yeah, I think the key is that both committees understand that the other one has an interest and, to run things by them.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the gist of it.
Okay, so,
So we could.
again, for me to
approve.
grasp. So the red line version, you guys are good with?
I think what
No,
I'm hearing is
okay.
they like
Yeah.
their version
Okay.
and made an effort in drafting their version to take into account
To incorporate all
provisions
the-
in the commercial use policy and draw them into, perhaps in simpler, more elegant language.
Yeah.
Okay, so we could have a motion to approve, unless there are other questions about the other aspects. Now, the red line version, there are a few other changes in that are really just cleanup changes.
Yeah, I did see some of that.
And did you have, so it could be sort of a little bit of taking some of the cleanup red line from that red line version, going back to the Harbor Committee's vendor section.
Yeah, I was comfortable, taking the red line version and striking, everything beginning with current permitted commercial uses.
Okay.
Can I
Yeah.
go over a couple? Yeah, I don't care for the should include either. I'm with you on that part, because who says we're gonna still have yoga down there or art classes? Hey, it should be something else that may include, or if we just don't
Maybe we
use
just go
it,
to,
just don't put it, because that's gonna could change annually
I mean,
or halfway through a season.
We,
Right, I kinda like that
Yeah.
better than this, but.
yeah,
if-
we've found it's very hard to predict what application might come in front of
Right.
us, so it might be
shouldn't
something
say-
great, it might be something not great, but it's likely that within the first year, it's something that's not on a list that we
Yeah.
create.
Right, and you can maybe, if you get to that point, maybe set a limit of 6 or 7 things or something, and not, I know the one food truck thing is a big issue with parks, so it can always be one food truck, but who knows who or even if. Right, and now, questions I did have though from the red line version, on the dinghy tie-offs, are you all right with that change of the engines down to prevent damage? I mean, did you see those parts? There was a
I
couple
thought
of
I-
weird things.
that
I
was
didn't
already in
realize.
there.
That was in
Oh,
there.
it was,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
That
Going
was
back
just
and forth,
moved.
I'm trying to.
Yeah. I
trying
think
to
it was
keep
moved
up.
from somewhere, maybe?
Yeah.
it was just added because we had it in one place but not in the
Alrighty.
other.
Oh, okay.
because
I
it
just
might
wanted to
check
make
in
sure
both.
that it wasn't just thrown in.
Oh, you know what? Actually, no. It is supposed to be in one place and not the other, because
Okay.
dinghy tie-offs do not need to leave, because they're not in danger of
They're not gonna
hurting any
hit
neighbors.
somebody else
Because they're
because of the way
you
they
know,
walked in there.
correct.
Okay.
Yep, so that doesn't need to be in there, but it
Okay.
does need to be in the general river tie-off.
Okay, and then the other point I noticed was a little awkward was, what about this part under the winter storage that's got the brackets?
So that
What are we
raises-
doing with that? Or is
well-
that something we were considering adding in, or it kind of makes sense?
This is a bigger question, and I guess we should talk about it now. John, I think there's a concern about winter storage over there. With the 2 storm events we had some pretty big boats with their jack stands sitting in 2 feet of water, and just very worried about what happens if those were to fail. In the town.
And on a lot of, not here maybe specifically, but I mean, just the beaches washing out, storms hitting California. I mean, big houses just washed right out. I mean, it doesn't mean it couldn't happen in our harbor. I mean, Camden happened there. I mean, they lost a lot. I mean, so it is a concern that if somebody's got their boat stored there and we get a massive wave hit the harbor, what's gonna happen? Yeah, I don't know. We need to consider these
Be
things.
unsure.
Yeah,
What'd you say, Jim?
It's gonna be unsure. That's what's
right.
gonna-
That's what's gonna happen, and the boat's gonna go with it.
The broader piece there is a really big topic. To narrow it down to the boat storage, I believe the town, has people sign a waiver for those, for people that are stored over there.
Yeah. Well, was noticing this was in brackets, and it didn't seem to be
Yeah, it's
anywhere
just-
else, and I was like,
What's the
It's-
phrase?
it's all boats shall have proof of liability insurance to protect the town and neighboring boats from any damage caused by stored boats. With the brackets, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, I would assume that people that own boats have them insured for storage points, but I don't know. I don't own a boat.
It depends on the policy.
Yeah.
For my business, I require that of my storage customers, but the insurance company will look at it differently versus,
Yeah.
stored in a building versus stored on land. But,
Yeah.
yeah.
How technical are we gonna get here? Because that is a very keen point about damage caused by stored boats. But if I'm not mistaken, the damage from this last storm almost happened because floats were going to float into the boats. So the way that's worded,
Yeah, and that would be sort of an act of God situation
yeah.
would be.
I don't know. I just was wondering why it was in brackets, really.
No,
is my
it's in
big
brackets because
concern.
it isn't any,
It's a
it was
bigger-
just a suggestion, a
Yeah.
concern, and it really, in my mind, had some, I know John is concerned about the use of that area for
Yeah.
stored boats.
I mean, the town budgets $12,000 a year for revenue on winter boat storage. It's not, $12,000 a year is not worth what a claim on one of those boats. It's not, it's just not. And yes, we have insurance, and yes, there's liability waivers. But what it once was or what it now is, it's not, I think a larger question has to be asked, is that a business that the town wants to be in for, a dozen, 12, 14, 15 boat owners? And concurrently, we have more floats than ever, it seems, that we're storing as well. So, these are all issues that I think the town has to confront and at least talk about. But, I'll say, it didn't give me a whole lot of comfort that when I'm looking at that last storm, we had that foot or two of water, and a couple of those boats were sitting in it, including our former town manager's boat. And I don't want to have, the town's harbor master worrying about things that really are not pieces of what's keeping our town's harbor alive. It's largely, as I look at it, it's a convenience that we can allow some, and I hope people can take advantage of it when it's allowed. But it's a concern that is that an avenue we want to provide in that space? Are there other uses, whether that's where the floats go or whatever it might be? Certainly as a revenue piece of this on the dollars and cents of it, I don't think it makes sense. But there's a lot of things we do that don't make sense in dollars and cents, and we do them anyway because it's the best thing. So I think that's a policy decision the town has to, the board will have to consider through its budget process. But I have heartburn about it personally.
Does it make sense to ask the Harbor Committee to look into that issue? Because I feel like we're sort of hitting you
Yeah,
blindsided with this.
we'd be really,
It
well,
just-
it's something that we've discussed, but we're happy to come up with a more
Yeah.
formalized recommendation on that.
I think that
Absolutely.
would be, I think that makes sense as a good starting place.
Yeah.
You're our eyes and ears on these issues, so.
Yeah. I mean, this rules document is, I think, came about because it was discovered as something that existed a long time ago and was a more fluid vehicle than the harbor ordinances for, changes and for Abby to, point to something simple. So I guess partly what I'm saying is, this can be somewhat iterative.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think particularly, we could have these ready to go. Know that winter storage, while it might be in here, is something that we are asking you all to consider. And
Add it to the work plan.
what did you say?
Add it to the work plan.
There you go. Which we haven't yet approved, as I
Right,
noted, so.
There you go.
Okay. So we could approve the rules and regulations as written with some of the sort of cleanup
Cleanup,
edits,
sure.
taking out the engines on the tie-offs. And I don't know about the liability insurance. I think we take that out, have you guys look at what you think the issues are.
We can always redo it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
You
we can
do it
always
before.
revisit it and update it
Right.
in
Yep.
a month or two if we have to.
Yeah, but it's
Yep.
part of a larger discussion, I think, that you guys would have.
Is the potential proposal here tonight for us to decide one way or another if we're accepting this?
Well,
Because
to
it seems.
approve
To
the rules
approve,
and regulations.
but that's,
With quite a few amendments.
There's a
Quite a
lot
few
of
amendments, and
amendments,
would we prefer to clean it up
I
and then
don't-
vote on it as
I
it's
personally
cleaned up?
don't know that I don't want to throw anything, monkey wrench into the works, but I don't think I could reasonably understand it enough to vote one way or another tonight.
Okay.
You know, I think there's awesome ideas and valid points all along there.
So we clean it
I
up
just
and
think
We
look
clean
at
it
it
up,
next
and
month.
next month
you
we
know.
have a cleaned up version. You guys have
If
looked
that
at it, make sure you're
Doesn't-
comfortable with
If that
it.
doesn't
and-
screw anything up, because,
I don't think there's any
There's
urgency.
no
I mean, it's nice to get things done,
Yeah.
but,
yeah,
but
Yeah.
not at the risk of and at the expense of not doing it right.
and I'm
So-
thinking how long it might take for us to hammer all these.
Well, we
Okay.
don't want to do that
Yeah, yeah,
with everybody
exactly.
here
Yeah,
tonight.
no, we can bring it to our meeting this month and,
Perfect.
describe what we think we heard tonight and send it back to you if you want.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
All right, so move to table that.
Yep, moved it.
And if it's of any help, I will
Second.
volunteer myself to look, to see if I can grasp it and all that.
Well, we're happy to circulate it,
Yeah.
Yeah,
we'll-
get it back to
yeah.
John and we'll.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll table that. The work plan, though, I
Well-
think
We'll just add winter storage to it, as you suggest.
yep.
The work.
Yeah, because I just got busy moving
Right.
on to rules and regs.
Not that you
without getting the work plan.
won't pick up on it probably in the next meeting anyway, but, might
Yeah.
as well add it there so we don't forget.
Yep.
So we can.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I move the board approve the work plan for the harbor committee as amended.
I
Second.
second. And third?
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay,
Yep.
good. All right, well, it's not always as clean and easy as you'd want it to be, but I think we came to a good result.
Great.
And
And then we're
Thank you.
then
skipping
we're
the
skipping
commercial.
commercial use policy. That's really being
Table that for now.
incorporated into the harbor rules and regs. All right, thank you very much, Sam,
Thank you.
and everyone on the committee. I appreciate the work.
Huh?
I'm going to move it.
I think I will, yeah.
that's a good idea.
Yeah, I'll try to make the next one. Last month was not easy.
Okay, so the next item is we changed our
Maybe the
agenda.
wharf now.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
going to do a discussion item on the wastewater recovery facility work.
I know.
Keeps crashing.
It's bad, yeah.
Put that between us, that'd be great.
Hey, Jeff. Just wanted to make sure you're still there.
Yeah, right. How's his ears?
The slides are the fun part.
You getting connected, Jeff?
I'm waiting for your computer to come on.
Okay.
Just triple check for inconsistencies. Discontinuous. The electrons don't flow so well.
No, when they're not plugged in?
Try that. Unplug that and plug it back in.
Universal fix.
It's in the back,
This is your computer.
but it's.
Yeah, but I gotta find, hey,
Nothing. Can he put his PowerPoint on your computer? I can. I can also try.
Well, we can kind of do a little introductory stuff after.
Yeah.
Get the stuff squared away, if that's okay.
I think that's wonderful. Yeah.
So, come on up, Brandon. Yeah. So this is gonna be a sort of an information session on what we've been going through here for the past year, actually 10 months or so, with respect to the WRF committee and the WRF task force that was established back in April of last year. And sort of by way of introduction, the members of the WRF committee that are here today are myself, Bill Bowe, and we got Sam Clark sitting right here, and Bob Colmar, next one down. Doug Cole, I think, is sunning himself somewhere in Florida or wherever he may be, I'm not sure at the moment. We have Brent Bridges here from Woodard Curran, who's our wastewater engineer, and we have Tyson Thornton in from Penn Bay Medical, so he's here to tell me not to say some things. Anyway, so Tyson's here, so we very much appreciate that. Any luck? Well, I'll just, oh, there we go.
Ta-da.
Let there be light.
Give me a show, there we go,
Magic.
perfect. So, can I really? Awesome. This is a fancy mouse. Is that working? Click it somewhere?
Cool.
Forward back.
You ought to be able to, rather than scrooge doogie, if you just take your finger down and up, it goes back.
Oh, that too, I can do that too, but, I mean, I was just thinking about being able to point to stuff, but apparently I can't do that.
Not letting you see the mouse.
No, that's okay.
Hang on, let me get out of there. I promised you it would, and then I, there you go.
Did you?
Okay, so double click on that plate. Oops. Okay, now go up to, above, the one on that.
Where's, right there, play?
No,
Right there.
there you go.
Beautiful.
Back to our regularly scheduled.
I still don't have a mouse, but that's okay, I'll just talk. So, you know, I started with this sort of cartoon, but aside from just being a sort of a silly joke, one of the things that we wanted to talk about a little bit, and you're gonna hear about today, is that the wastewater treatment plants of today that are being constructed are not your wastewater treatment plants of yesterday that you could all tell when you were within a half a mile of it and it smelled to high heaven and all that sort of thing. So we did tour one that Brent assured us that if we drank the water, we'd be fine. I don't think anybody did, unless Michael did, I don't remember.
I
But,
avoided that.
you look the same to me now that you
Yeah.
look back there, so apparently
I was
not.
close.
But you'll hear a little bit about the differences in terms of these facilities and how they are now. But the task force was originally constructed back in April of 2023, And the purpose of it was to sort of establish a common foundation on the issues that we've had with Camden, and we all kind of know about that. Solicit community input on various alternatives that had already been put on the table. And then also take a look and solicit input on siting considerations, risk, cost, all that sort of thing. And then we will report back to, importantly, the town select board, town operations, and importantly, the residents, okay? And so the task force was formed to kind of be a neutral board, if you will, of folks, or task force that would pull together these recommendations and look at and go to community engagement on this. Now, as it turned out, we didn't really do it in this particular order. We stayed familiar with Camden's situation, and when we started looking at data, we realized we had to kind of go back to the drawing board a little bit, which we've done. And now we're gonna go to the public piece of this, which is what we'll get through tonight. So the first quarter, May, June, July, we kind of looked at the existing siting options, the old reports that, we've all seen various presentations of. There was a preliminary engineering report dated March 2022, and then we had some permit-related discussions with the Maine Department of Environmental Protection to try and understand whether or not certain things were feasible, and that was back in July. Moving on to the next quarter, we really kind of concluded that the original March 2022 PER really needed to be revised and expanded. And then in October of last year, we engaged with Woodard Kern and Brent, who worked at the direction of the task force to complete the PER. So I think it's fair to say that we worked closely with you all as a task force. And while John and the select board and various members remained aware of what we were doing, I think they were very good about letting us drive the process so that we could do the thing, on behalf of the expertise that we had pulled together. So the scope of this PER that we're gonna talk about tonight, we looked at an evaluation of 4 potential locations. It was Kramer Park, that was the one that we were all familiar with. We looked at Public Works, we looked at Penn Bay Medical, and we looked at Glen Cove Park. And then we evaluated 3 different technologies, a membrane bioreactor, which you'll hear about quite a bit, a long thing called SAGB that I won't bore you with, but it's similar to MBRs in terms of its outcomes. And then we looked at conventional activated sludge, which is more of a traditional sort of technology. We also had estimates of probable cost pulled together. And then importantly, we asked Brent to pull together a feasibility analysis and a risk review. In other words, we could say that it's gonna cost this much to put it here, but what are the feasibility areas associated with that? Can we permit it? Are there some construction issues that we have to worry about? Certain location considerations and that kind of thing from a feasibility analysis. And then we also asked them to do a risk evaluation. What are the risks if we do this? If we embark on this particular technology at this particular location, will we run into roadblocks a year from now that we're gonna say, geez, why didn't we think of that? So we went through that process to try and figure out sort of from a fatal flaw analysis perspective, what made the most sense. Importantly, I wanted to mention that we did not ask for a specific recommendation in the PER from Woodard Kern. And that's gonna flow from the public meetings, this being the first of them, if you will, that we've got scheduled up in the early part of March. So we didn't ask for specific recommendations from that perspective. Some of the other things that we did as part of this, we stayed aware of the ongoing Camden discussions, but we really didn't participate in them at all. We produced a summary for the Rockport resource. We did site visits to each of the proposed locations in Rockport. There were 4 of them. We did a fairly extensive walkthrough just to kind of get a feel for each one. We made site visits to the 3 technologies being considered. We ended up in Lincolnville for one of that's the SAGB, that's the Lincolnville facility. Went to Oxford and looked at an MBR technology, and we went to Bridgeton to look at sort of conventional activated sludge. So we did some, driving around looking at that stuff. We met in Augusta with the Maine Department of Environmental Protection permitting folks to make sure that we really could get a permit for what we were considering, and that went well. We met with Tyson and his staff to get a better handle on what was going on at the hospital and whether that was a feasible place for us to potentially site this facility. I met with Maine Water a couple of times, including touring their facility, because they're gonna potentially be contributing some water, which is a revenue stream for us. But they also have a similar technology to this MBR. Now they're taking clean water and making it cleaner. We're taking some not so clean water and making it cleaner, but it's the same basic technology. We work with Megan to pull together some financial models that we'll talk about in a little bit. And we're also in the process of developing a wastewater strategic plan for the community because, we've got this concern about having our own plant, But what about the piping network? Where's it going now? Should it be going in the future? How does that overlay with main water? I mean, I had dinner with some folks Friday night that get public water, but they're on their own septic system. How much of that's going on in the town, and should we be overlaying from a growth perspective, because Maine Water is looking at additional markets to grow their business? And should we be doing the same thing on behalf of the town for various reasons? So that strategic plan is sort of a work in progress, but this is part of it. So that's the sort of preamble for what we were doing. I think I'm gonna turn it over to you, Brent, to go through the results of the PER and kind of get everybody up to speed on what you guys have found.
I am an arm waver from way back, and so sitting at a table and not waving my arms at the screen is going to be very hard for me to do. I'm going to do my best. So I'm just warning you. And I was promised a mouse that would point, and I don't have one of those. So I'm doing a presentation that looks like this right now, and I'm going to do my best.
Do you want me to be your mouse up there?
You can.
Okay.
Can you be my mouse?
I will be your mouse.
So as we go through this, I'll try to, to get a floor to talk about wastewater. I could talk for hours, but I've been told that's not good by the gentleman in the corner, so I'm going to be really quick. I'll breeze really quick through this because it is fascinating. And wastewater doesn't have to smell. I keep telling Bill that. It doesn't have to smell. He just believes it because it doesn't smell. So when we're trying to set a new wastewater plant, there's three parts of it. There is where can you put it? What kind of technology do you want to use? And then no matter where you put it, how do you connect up your existing system to get it to that place? All right, so it's a three-part equation. And so as we're going through it, what we had, hopefully it'll go, whoop, I'm going backwards or forward?
Scroll.
Tell you what.
Right?
You gonna do it for me?
Well, we'll give you this.
No, you just keep doing it. I'm good.
Just tell me when.
I'm good. I can wave my arms. I can do that. So existing collection system. And so what you see here is a map with all the colors. And so what all those colors are, each part of your sewer system drains to a pump station, and that pump station pumps to other pump stations. From about midway through that map, everything goes south to Rockland, and everything from the middle goes north to Camden. And so what you see is all those points, and so this is where your whole system goes. So it all flows to a pump station, pumps to other pump stations, and eventually pumps north or south. And then treatment occurs currently today, either at the Rockland plant or the Camden plant. Next. So as Bill mentioned, when we looked at alternatives, the one thing we wanted to look at as far as different alternatives is we wanted different parts of town to see from a good comparison. If you picked 4 sites right next to each other, there's not much of a comparison. And so really to say, what if we got kind of in the southern section of town, kind of in the Rockland section, down there, which are Penn Bay and Glen Cove Park. And then what do we have in the northern section, which are Public Works and then Kramer Park? And say, seems like if we had those 4 areas, that'll give you a good feel about where things can flow and where things can go. Next. Process flow diagrams. I'm going to go as fast as I can. As fast as I can. This is fascinating to me. I could talk for hours. So, of the 3 different systems, the front end of each of the systems and the back end, so technology. So wastewater flows in, and the first thing you do is you screen it and get out all the rags and wipes and gravel and everything else that shouldn't be on the wastewater. And so no matter what kind of system you have, and this happens to be the SAGB system, the left-hand side, you have a bar rack or you have a screen, so everything that shouldn't go into the system doesn't go in the system. On the right-hand side, on all of these systems, wastewater has to get disinfected. And so the clean water gets disinfected. We use ultraviolet disinfection these days. Many plants across the state use chlorine. So they chlorinate it and then dechlorinate it and ship it out. Our feeling is that that is not something that you'd want to expose yourself to. We're trying to get away from chlorine, just from the handling from an operations standpoint and the impact on the environment. And so all of the systems we're looking at on the back end are ultraviolet disinfection, which is basically passing the water through an ultraviolet tube, a light bulb, disinfects it, and then ships it out. And so all 3 of the technology we're talking about have those things in common. Screen out the bad stuff and disinfect the clear water. The magic, I think the next one. So the magic happens in the middle. This is the SAGB tanks. This is Lincolnville. Now, Lincolnville, what you'll see is a couple of pictures of Lincolnville, and this is right next to the ferry terminal. So if you go, you're in the parking lot at the ferry terminal, you look left of the water, you look right, and you can see our beautifully staged tanks. The nice thing about the SAGB tanks are, from a technology standpoint, most of it's underground. So we don't have tanks that are visible above ground, concrete tanks that you see. Most of everything can be underground. And so all of those tanks you're seeing, and this next one is, so that is on the left-hand side, that's the kind of control building. Lincolnville is a smaller site than yours, and so it's smaller footprint. All the sites we're looking will need about an acre of land to be able to put it on, so no matter what kind of technology. This is the Lincolnville site, so what you see here is kind of the operations building. In that operations building are the ultraviolet disinfection, a couple of blowers, all the electrical gear. So that's the only building on the site is that particular building on the left. On the right-hand side is just the generator, and you can see kind of visually the tanks. They're a little bit above the ground, so they're not buried that much. You get access to them. And so that's the nice thing about the SAGB system is most of it can be in the ground, in tanks. Very little above ground structures are required for something like that. The SAGB system is, I talked about when wastewater comes in and you screen it all out and then you disinfect it. What happens in the SAGB system is water comes in, you kind of equalize it, let it kind of flow. So you have a bunch of tanks that'll let it kind of equalize out. So if you've got peaks, like in the morning and night, we all shower and get up and there's peaks of flow in the morning and night, it'll equalize that out, flow into tanks. What the system does is it's activated growth. What it is we grow bugs in the tanks. And when you grow the bugs, that's what treats the wastewater. And then when you collect all the bugs, that's what you have as biosolids or sludge or whatever. And so growing bugs in tanks is what we're doing in this particular system. The unique part of this is when we push the wastewater in, it's above layers of gravel or media. And so you push wastewater in the tank, the water kind of goes down through the gravel. At the bottom of the gravel, there's a drain. We pull the clean water up and take it and disinfect it. So all the treatment happens by wastewater coming in. We blow a bunch of air in it. It grows a bunch of bugs. The bugs sit on the top of the gravel. Water goes down through. We take off the bottom and treat it and discharge it. And so all that stuff on the top, we kind of recycle back, and every now and then you have to haul it away. But it's basically growing bugs, filtered down through a media, and that's what we have. That's why you can put most of the tanks underground. Activated sludge, been around forever. I mean, this is from the beginning of time, right? 100 years or whatever, activated sludge. So this is very conventional system. Again, what you do here is what you'll see typically when you're driving around and looking at a lot of treatment plants. For those of you who don't do it, it is fascinating to go around and see them. When you see the big concrete tanks that are sitting above ground or like aluminum domes on that's what you'd normally see as activated sludge. It's very popular. It's been popular for years and years. What happens there is you do it in the same way. It's not as compact. It's a lot more tanks. It's a lot larger footprint that you need in order to do something like that. A lot more tanks, growing bugs, pushing them around. And so it just takes more space to be able to do something like that. The nice thing about activated sludge is everybody knows how to run it. Everybody knows what happens. It does produce a little more sludge in solids. All what we all hear about PFAS and wastewater and treatment. Reduction of solids is a really important thing because the more wastewater, more sludge you have to dispose of, the more costly it is. And so one of the things about activated sludge is it does produce a little bit more sludge than the other ones we're talking about. And so that's a concern. But very easy to run, very traditional, a lot of tankage. So all your things there. Next one. So when I talk about Lincolnville's been up and running for a couple of years now. So that's up and running, meeting, handling the beach area. This is a project in Bridgeton that we've been constructing for the last couple of years. We started accepting wastewater flow from town on January 2nd. So it is fresh. As a matter of fact, it's so fresh, we actually, this week, took a couple of tanker trucks to the Lewiston Auburn Water Pollution Control, got some of their bugs, and seeded this plant, because without good bugs, you can't get good treatment. It's all about the bugs. And so we couldn't grow them fast enough, so we imported some bugs from Lewiston Auburn to be able to seed this plant so it'll work. What you're seeing here is, this is a unique activated sludge plant, and it's compact. Most of the time when I talk about activated sludge, it's a bunch of tanks all over the place. It's almost like a campus. What we tried to do here is to bring all those tanks together in one tank. And so what you're seeing there is there's a process building on the back side of it. And all of that tank, that is the entire treatment facility at Bridgeton. Water comes in, we split it, 2 trains, blow air, grow bugs, circulate things back and forth, get clean water. And in the Bridgeton facility, we don't have a place to discharge it. And so we have 5 acres of land that we pressurize an irrigation system. So we push that clean water into the soil over about a 5 acres piece, because Bridgeton does not have any wastewater, any place to discharge. So it's very unique. Next one. This is a couple of pictures. Again, I don't have great pictures. They're still solar ground, but that's the back side of the tanks on the left. We have 2 buildings there. The building on the left, a building in the center, houses all of the blowers, and we blow a lot of air. Whenever you're treating wastewater, you got to blow air into the, it's just one of the things. To grow bugs, you need oxygen. We blow a lot of air. And so that whole houses the blowers, all the electrical gears, all of the pumps that push the wastewater up to the beds where we dispose of them. On the right, 2 things. Number 1, there's a laboratory and office for the worker. And on we also have that's what I call the screening. When you talk about the wastewater coming in, it gets screened before it goes in place. We screen it in that building. We ship it to the tanks. We treat it, and then ship it up. So it's just 2 buildings on that facility, and that's the Bridgeton facility. Last one.
One question?
Oh, yes.
If I may. What size population base does that facility serve?
Bridgeton's about 6,000 people. Yep. So next one is a membrane facility. Again, same front end, back end. The thing about a membrane facility is, and the reason they've gained in popularity, and what Maine Water does as far as treating water, making water clean is way easier than making wastewater clean. But I will always say that. So that in the middle is, what you have here is wastewater comes in. It's not as much tankage. What you're doing is you have cartridges. So let's say you have wastewater that sits in a tank. You have kind of a panel that you drop into the wastewater. And in that panel, there is a kind of a filter on the outside of that panel. And there's like little holes in the middle of that panel. You put a vacuum pressure on it. So wastewater comes into a tank. You put a little vacuum pressure on that panel, and you're pulling the wastewater into that filter. And what happens is, as you pull it through that filter, very fine, it cleans the water. And then anything that stops on the outside, anything that stops on the outside, and bugs are growing on that too, kind of sloughs off and turns into sludge. So that's a membrane facility. And so that's what you see, all that. Again, tankage, you come in, same sort of thing, except you have, as opposed to growing bugs in a bunch of tanks or filtering it down through like gravel media, here you have plastic and fabric filters that you're just very small particles can get through, and you're pulling it through. And so this is the next picture is the Oxford facility. This is all of the tanks. So this is in a building. This whole facility is an entire building. So everything from the lab to the bathrooms to the office to every pump and electrical control is in one building. This is the kind of the working floor of the building. You'll see it's kind of translucent panels on one side. So all of the tanks below that are where all the wastewater goes. And so this facility is currently can handle 150,000 gallons a day. It's designed for 250,000 gallons a day. And this has been in operation about 5 years.
It's roughly the size that we're looking at.
Yeah, about the size. Next couple of pictures just show how that's the facility. It's in a downtown area, and so that's how it looks and how we designed it as far as what it looks like. So everything, outside of the generator is contained within that building. All the treatment, all the screening, everything else. Okay, now I can go fast. What we did as part of the PER is we took each one of those treatment facilities and we did a cost to say if we were doing like this is the Lincolnville facility that's upscaled to handle your flow, what would it look like? And we came up with about a $16 million cost to do that facility, forget where it is. Any way you want to put it, it would cost $16 million to build that facility for your flows. Next. O&M costs, about $400,000. All of these are about the same amount of cost to run, and when you look at it, it's always at least a two-person operation. People need holidays and vacations and things like that, so it's really two people to operate it. So they're all about $400,000. And I didn't do all of them, I just did a couple to give you an example. So, next. So, when I talk about the technology, the next thing is you've got to get it to wherever, you've got to get it to, if you're doing a public works or you're going to Penn Bay, you don't currently go that. Your wastewater goes that way. And so what we've done in each one of these, and this is when we're doing public works, and I've also got Penn Bay, is like when you're doing it, and the little yellow is where public works is, so that's the location of where the new facility would be. We said, we've got, for instance, you don't currently pump to it. And so what we've done, showed in the colors, is what you'd have to put for infrastructure. Like, if you've got a pump station that goes this way, now you got a pump station that's got to go that way. So you might have to change the pumps out in the pump station and then put a new force main in. So now everything, you've got to pump what's going to Rockland and Camden, now you've got to pump it to Public Works. And so we also have a cost to be able to, how to change all your flows around to get to all these sites. Public Works looks like that. And we said, if you were taking everything you currently have and now everything's going to go to Public Works, it's about a $5 million cost on top of what I just showed you, which was what, $16 million? And so that's to say, to get everything to that site. And so we did some costing out of how that would, what all that would be, including an outfall. Each of them have an outfall to the ocean. Next. Penn Bay, same thing. So what we'd have to do, as you can see down on the bottom of the screen, in the kind of the aqua blue, a lot of force main, because it's not going there currently, so we'd have to take things from the village, pump it down to that particular area to be able to get it there. And everything else you see in a little bit of the aqua blue is other kind of changes within the system we'd have to do to make sure things flowing the other way. The nice thing is a lot of your system has been put in, the most recent pump stations have been put in, so kind of the force mains can go either way, and the pump stations can be flipped over to go either way. And so that was a bit of foresight, so that they pretty easy to swap those over, so you don't have a lot of work to be able to do that. You've still got about from the village all the way down to Penn Bay, you've still got a pretty good sized force main to be able to put in. Next. And I think we said, so Penn Bay, we did infrastructure costs a little bit more to get it to Penn Bay than it is to get it to Public Works. It's farther, right? It's just that much farther on the road. And so we did that. And so the last thing, thanks. So,
and just real quick, to be clear, you just saw examples for each,
right.
Okay? They did costing for all four of the sites for infrastructure upgrades and for all three of the technologies. So this is the summary of that, but we didn't show you, we just showed you examples. Okay.
And this summarizes it. I could be here all night doing all the examples, but so each alternative, all the three sites, all the three technologies, we came up with a capital cost, and that is the treatment plant, and it is the cost to get the flow there, is included in that capital cost. And the O&M cost is just a variation of what it would cost to run each one of those plants. And so before I get to, real quick, the next ones, layouts, we also, as part of the PER, we wanted to be able to say, like, for instance, at Public Works, and I know this is somewhat hard to see, is that if you can look and see kind of the pink, what we've done is, Bill put it. So if this is a Public Works facility, the existing buildings that are there right now, what we've done is we've cited and said, if we're going to put the facility, if we're going to put the Lincolnville plant on that facility, what we've shown is in all the pink, all the tanks that would be required. And so we've kind of shown how it would fit on that facility. So you can see, again, each one of these is plus or minus an acre or so land to be able to get access to and then plant everything. And so what we did is for each one of them, This will be rapid fire. That's the conventional activated sludge site, a little bit bigger. Membrane, and you can see it's kind of one building as opposed to separate things because we can kind of compact it into one particular building. So we tried to lay it each for, I guess, used examples, Public Works, and the next couple are Penn Bay. So we're looking at, on the Penn Bay site, one of the things, and Tyson is here tonight, is to talk about, they have an existing facility. They have an existing wastewater collection facility. So they do a little bit of treatment, and then they pump that to Rockland. And so one of the things we've shown is, in place of where that facility is right now, we'd put the new facility. Makes sense. That's where it's going right now, and that's what it's used for. And again, it's about an acre of land. It kind of fits the needs. And so we were able to look at that. And this is just, this particular one is like the Lincolnville, or the activated growth facility you can see down there. And here's the membrane site. Didn't show the activated sludge site in this one. It ends up being, because that's needs more land and needs more stuff, that tends to be more problematic to go on a site like this. And so I just chose to exclude it. It doesn't fit quite as nicely on the site as the other two technologies. And the last,
map all of them.
Yes.
All the technologies at all the sites, really just for a visual, does it fit? It's not a specific design, it won't look exactly like that, but just was feasible.
and the last rapid fire is feasibility scoring. We looked at land use, and if we had to acquire land, outfalls, operations, funding considerations, permitting, getting a license, again, environmental impact, constructability, all those kind of things as we went through. Feasibility rankings, we ranked them 1 to 3 to be able to come through and say, hey, how do we take all those things? Primarily, the numbers aren't as important. It's just we made consideration that all those things are factors that have to go into a thought as far as what you might want to do as far as the technology or the location of the cost. And then lastly, just came up with an impact. We kind of combined all those things as far as, and said, how does it end up? And then I think the last one is, and then total risk. So we said likelihood, feasibility, impact, and kind of say, again, didn't make any conclusions, but at least put together enough things to kind of make a decision or a thought about what might be the appropriate. And I think that's it. And now it's questions on the PER.
Which will be posted to the WRF website on the town website tomorrow. It'll be there along with this presentation as well, but we're not done, so sorry. All right, on to the next. Did I do that, or did you do that?
I did not do that.
Okay, good. All right, so this is a rehash of the cost summaries. We're going to talk about the economics a little bit here for a few minutes in terms of what that looks like. So this is the same slide that Brent showed up earlier. I just duplicated it in here. So when we looked at the financial analysis, there were a number of things that we looked at. We modeled a bunch of different scenarios for comparison purposes, and we'll look at those here in a minute. We made very conservative assumptions regarding TIF revenues. We didn't say there's going to be a windfall for anything that was going to make the numbers skew one way or the other. We also did not include grant opportunities, which they are out there, okay? But no grant money was built into the models either for this initial screening thing. The estimates of probable cost, there's a couple of caveats here, these last two bullets. That look, we're undergoing ongoing review. Every time we get a look at this, we talk a little bit, make some estimates. So the numbers you're going to see tonight may not be the exact same numbers that you see at the public meetings we've scheduled for March 6th and 7th, but they're going to be real close. I just don't want anybody to pull out the eraser and wonder, what the heck went on. Okay, so the financial analysis, we modeled the following scenarios. The first one, and I say we, Megan, and I'm reporting on it, we modeled a new contract with Cameron and Rockland, okay, just no new WRF. Then we looked at potential WRF cost, okay? So there's two pieces to the WRF. There's what it costs us, and then there's revenue on the other side of it. So on the cost side, we've got a WRF only with no Route 90 expansion. Route 90 is part of this discussion. And that's a roughly 22 million to 29 million CapEx. That's the low end, which is going to be Kramer Park, up to the high end, which is Glen Cove Park, okay, and everything in the middle. We also looked at the WRF plus Route 90 expansion, and that's another 9 million on top of the WRF itself. And as we saw, the operating cost for all the scenarios was about $400,000 a year. So we didn't make an effort to try and decide, the cost between 390 and 410. It just, there's no point to that. So about 400,000 a year. So that's the cost side of it. What are we gonna pay, okay? Now, the revenue side of it is what are we gonna be pulling in? And that's a combination of two things. It's user rate, it's how much we flush the toilet and use water down the drain, plus debt service. How much bonding did we do and how much debt are we taking on? So the two together is the total cost. And we modeled 4 different cases for that. The base case, which is right now about 89,000 gallons per day, that's what we currently flow, but with no Route 90 extension. Just put a new WRF in to cover the stuff we're pumping right now to Camden and Rockland. The next one was what we're calling an expected case, is that we have the current flow, but because we've got if we do the Route 90 expansion, we've got new customers, if you will, that run along that line. And Brent will say that the typical absorption of that is about 90% after 10 years. We modeled 70 just to be somewhat conservative with it. But we assume that anybody who's got the line passing in front of them is gonna hook up at least within 10 years. And 90 is fair, okay?
Yep.
And we use 70. We're also gonna get 10,000 gallons per day from Maine Water. It's part of their treatment process, and if we take it out to Route 90 all the way to Route 17, there's a connection. Maine Water's gonna provide us with 10,000 a day. If you're thinking about what that may have looked like a year ago, they thought it was closer to 100,000. So it was good for us to have those meetings with Maine Water to understand more fully how much they were actually going to be giving us. So that was the expected case. The potential case involved potentially new development out Route 90, closer to Route 17. And you can talk to Orion about what the specifics around that may be, but that's additional flow, if you will, of about 45,000 gallons per day based on the potential for new development. So that totals 179,000 gallons per day. And then the best case is we get 100% plus all the existing flows. So you can see there's a big range from 89,000, which is what we're doing today, gallons per day, up to a high of 224,000 gallons. Now, these are average flows, okay? That's not peak flows, it's not design flows, because you have to design to handle more, and you can talk to Brent about what that specific is, but it's not, if we need to handle an average of 224, we're gonna have to design for more just to be able to handle it, but this is just the revenue side of it, okay? So when you start looking at it, and I don't wanna scare everybody with this stuff, but there's essentially, this is the user rate, average annual user rate cost per user, which generally means per household. So that's how much we are putting down the drain at our homes and how much we're charged per 100 cubic feet when the bill comes from Maine Water. The blue is year 1, the orange is year 10, as far as projecting out cost. When you look carefully at that, you'll see that the new contract with Camden and Rockland puts our user rate somewhere around $1,100 a year, year 1, and about, say, $1,400, $1,500 per household user rate fees per year at year 10. Now, if we build our own system, you can see that the user rates are considerably lower, and they get lower as you go. Apologies for some of the Axes labels we were scrambling here in the last hour trying to get them. But if you just look fairly simply at the WRF only, Public Works, no Route 90 extension, okay, that's that third one from the left. You can see the blue is somewhere around 700, 650 a year for user rates at year 1 versus the current about 1,100 or so that we're paying to Camden. And at year 10, that goes up with additional costs to somewhere around $850 to $900 per year. That's the third one over. And as you start moving to the right, that's when the Route 90 revenue comes in, because you've got new users that are capable of moving into the system. And so that 70% that we modeled, if you will, for users on Route 90 that will eventually hook up by year 10, you can see that the user rates run just north of 400 per year on sort of the middle graphs, and then the orange ones at year 10, somewhere around $600 per year out 10 years from now, and so on and so on. And so as you get additional development out Route 90, new stuff, the user rate fees annually continue to drop down. And so best case wise, if you're looking out, you know, at the far right-hand side, year one, our user rate fees per user household, if you will, about $350 versus currently what we're seeing with Camden is somewhere around, again, you know, $1,100 per user on an annualized basis. So this is just user rates, all right? Now, as you might imagine, on the debt service side, if we don't build a new system and get a new contract with Rockland, we're gonna see debt service hang right around $300 a year for each individual user, okay? If we build a system but don't connect up to Route 90, you're gonna see the next two there to the right are climbing fairly high in terms of debt service because we spent a lot of money on a WRF system, about roughly $22 million, but we didn't hook up any new users because we didn't go out Route 90. So there's no, you know, cost relief, if you will, from that particular piece of it. And then as you move further to the right, you can see that with the Route 90, with the various cases, as you look at Route 90, they start dropping. And they're hanging somewhere between $600 and $700 per year per user. Okay, so that's the debt service. Not unexpected. No, you know, new contract, we're gonna hang pretty low, and as you build things, you know, you're gonna have additional debt service. Now, this is a savings graph, and now you can sort of mentally figure out what that, did I just skip one? Nope. Oh, good gravy.
Do the total?
The total must be blanked out. Huh. Well, imagine, if you will, sorry about that. This is the savings. It's kind of the same thing. I don't know, Jeff, if you can find that thing and unhide it.
Yeah, there it is, right there, I need the mouse, or you get to do it.
No, No, I don't want them on the graph. It's the graph. It's the graph that's hidden. Where's on? Oh, it's hidden right here.
Yeah.
Is it up? No, shoot, it's the next one. It's that one.
English savings?
No, I don't know why that was there. It's an Apple system, I don't understand it that way. Go to the,
Is that it? That's it right there.
Yeah, what about
Isn't it?
this one right
I
here?
think that's it right there.
That's, it's representative, yes. Open that up, if you will, to the show. Thank you, okay. So that's the,
Debt service again.
that's the,
Maybe just blow up that window.
yeah, we're just gonna leave it. We're gonna go to savings, because total it flows from that. Savings flows from the totals. If you look at the savings here, on the far left is the annual, new contract with Cameron Rockland. That's the base case, so there's no savings. That's just what the case is. As you can imagine, if we build the WRF without going out Route 90, okay, you're gonna say we're gonna take on additional debt. Even though our user fees will drop, the additional debt will take the costs higher than they currently are with Camden and Rockland, okay? So that's the blue at year one and the orange at year 10. As you move into the Route 90 cases, you can see that if we build the WRF and we just put in the line out Route 90, we don't get any new development in as far as the revenue piece, but just the people that are on Route 90 that will hook up, again, 70%, Brent's number's 90, you can see that the savings, if you will, for doing that at year one is almost zero. In other words, it's almost identical to staying with Camden and Rockland right now. Again, build the WRF, do the Route 90 extension, the savings at year one are essentially nil. It's the same. But at year 10, because we're not being subjected to additional fees from Camden, you can see the annual savings is about $600 a year. That's that third one from the left in the color. That's the total savings that we'll see by year 10 per user in each household. Each household saves $550, $575 per year. And that, as you add users, that continues to go up. Okay, so if you build Route 90 and you get additional absorption, even in year one, you're going to start seeing additional benefit from having that increased flow from the users out Route 90. And of course, if you go all the way out to the best case on the right-hand side, you can see that the savings every year come at 10 years close to $1,000. It's almost half, okay, in terms of the economics of the project. apologies for that, but let's just kind of go through this fairly quickly. So if we construct the WRF and the Route 90 extension, costs in year one are no higher than staying with Camden and Rockland. Again, that was what I was saying earlier, it's flat, okay? And there are substantial savings, $600 a year per user by year 10. So accessing the potential users out Route 90 past the high school provides additional revenue for user fees and debt service, and that includes the contribution from Maine Water, because we need that line out there. So, you know, and part of this, from a benefits perspective, from an financial analysis, providing the public sewer allows us to expand the tax base overall, because we can get development. We need the sewer to get the development out there, and that will expand the tax base in the town. And that's an important piece just from a, you know, simple tax management perspective. A couple other things to consider here. There's no indication right now that Camden would permit an increase in our capacity allocation. It's one thing to talk about rates, but it's also about capacity. If we can't pump more water, we can't get that additional tax revenue. And I'm not talking about paying for the work, I'm just talking about tax revenue in general. So we're kind of capped off from that perspective. So right now, we're about 89,000 gallons per day, and the best case was 224. So we need to ask Camden for another 135 in terms of an allocation of additional capacity. And they've indicated, because I've seen them say it personally, they don't want our water now, let alone have us go to 135,000. So that's an issue to consider. And our lack of cost and capacity control is also a financial issue, because we're less competitive that way. We're paying more money in order to get rid of our wastewater. The last thing I wanted to mention is that we are also, and everybody, you know, many may or may not know this, we're in receipt of a notice of violation from US EPA for our water quality in the harbor anyway. We received that in 2013. And we've been responding to that periodically with letters back to the US EPA and the DEP saying what we've been doing to try and minimize and limit the amount of bacteria and pharmaceuticals along with it as marker compounds, in other words, septic waste that's going out into the harbor. Now, you know, over the long term, being able to improve the water quality in Rockport Harbor, because we are collecting public sanitary waste, will over the long haul improve the water quality in the harbor. It's a long-term strategy, it's not something that's gonna change in a year or two, but from a long-term perspective. The other thing that allows us to potentially avoid financial exposure with respect to enforcement action. You know, Camden's got a consent order that flowed from a notice of violation. We only have a notice of violation. And nobody can predict when US EPA or DEP is gonna come back and say, you know, you haven't done enough. So this is another component of that. But from a long-term harbor water quality perspective, getting the bacteria out of the Goose River, getting it out of Harkness Brook, getting it out of Ott Brook. Again, long-term stuff, not happening tomorrow, but that's another potential financial benefit to us if we're not subjected to costly enforcement. So from a summary perspective, this is going to take about 4 to 6 years to do, and it's feasible at all 4 locations. The risk and liability analysis favors Public Works and Penn Bay Medical Center. I mean, it doesn't favor Kramer Park, it doesn't favor Glen Cove Park. All 3 technologies are feasible, with MBR and that the Lincolnville system, if you will, are the most favorable from a cost and a risk perspective. The conventional activated sludge, the one that we saw, the big outdoor tanks at Bridgeton, that's feasible, but it's more expensive, okay? The WRF CapEx costs themselves range from about $22 million to $29 million. 22 is Kramer Park, the highest is Glen Cove, and the others are in the middle on the way up. We have to take into account current land use, geotechnical and permitting risks, and outfall routing. I mean, specifically, if you want to look at Public Works, once we get that waste treated, we take it back to Route 1, where's it going to go? We're going to go straight across into the ocean? Well, that goes through some folks' property, and we don't know whether we're going to get the legal right to do that. All right, so that's a big risk, and if we can't do that, then we have to take a line north or south along Route 1 in order to get close enough. Whereas at the hospital, there's already a line from where they currently treat that goes out to the edge of the ocean. It's already there. They used it decades ago. It's been abandoned, but it's been cameraed recently, and it's intact. So that's a gigantic benefit for us to be able to go to an area where they're already treating, and they already had a route down to the ocean. Now it only goes to the edge, which is where you used to put it, but now we have to take it out into about 15 feet of water below mean low tide to make the DEP happy. But it's already a big step in the right direction. We don't have to do a lot of construction in that area. So we have to take into account those kinds of things in terms of risk, in terms of feasibility, and from the cost perspective. Including the Route 90 extension is critical to the project economics, as well as providing other economic and environmental benefits to Rockport. And you can see that just from some of the things that we went through. If we only build the WRF, then it's roughly flat with Camden and Rockland based on the escalation in cost. Route 90 is a critical piece of that. Siting the WRF at Penn Bay also may provide an additional operational resilience factor for the hospital. And I say may. That's, hospitals nowadays are starting to look at reuse of MBR treated wastewater in some of their other water consumption areas, whether it's cooling towers or boiler water or irrigation or flushing toilets. That's starting to happen around the country. And if we have a system right there, that may be a way to save Penn Bay Medical some financial cost, in addition to the fact that if Mirror Lake has a catastrophic failure, a tanker truck rolls over into it, and they have a release of fuel oil or gasoline into Mirror, and they have to shut the water off, that includes Penn Bay. Okay, it includes all of us, but it also includes the hospital. And if we're able to recycle some of that water, effectively clean water, that very first slide, why aren't you drinking it? And I'm not suggesting potable use, but if we can use that to help them with their operational resilience, that might be a good benefit for siting it down there. Final recommendations to the town are going to be developed after some public meetings that we have in March. We're going to have a couple of meetings that we'll talk about right here. Next steps. We're going to have a little informational handout at the library on Election Day, assuming Megan will still take it when I think it was due a couple days ago. We're going to have a couple of public meetings at the Opera House, March 6th at 6:30 and March 7th at 3 o'clock. And that'll hopefully catch the two cohorts that would normally come out to these sorts of things. And so we're going to have those at the Opera House. There's a select board meeting on March 11th, and where we will be presenting to you the outcome of the public meetings and what various comments were and what people thought, ideas they may have. And then there's a select board meeting again in April where potentially consideration of public referendum for June. That's sort of the macro picture on the schedule. And then lastly, and again, I'll reemphasize that this presentation as well as the PER will be posted to the website at some point tomorrow. So, questions? That was a lot.
I can't thank you. I mean, what an amazing level of work that you have done for us. And we really appreciate that.
We had a lot of help.
I mean, it surprised me when I heard that Rockport Harbor already has the notice.
A violation.
Right. And that comes, as I understand, from private sewers kind of leaching into the rivers and.
The issue is.
Partly.
It's bacteria in the harbor water, which includes pharmaceutical products. In other words, derivatives of caffeine, derivatives of nicotine, derivatives of blood pressure medications. In other words, it's not that the birds and the dogs don't take that stuff, okay? And so we're picking it up. It doesn't mean it's hazardous in terms of its actual concentration. It's just more of a marker that says, where's this stuff coming from? And so we are seeing that kind of thing. And we made a lot of effort to try and find the source directly in the area of Goodies Beach. I mean, there's been no shortage of that, particularly in the sort of 8-9 years ago when Bob Kennedy really focused on that. And we were unsuccessful in figuring out specifically for Goodies. But the same stuff's coming down the Goose. And the same stuff's coming into Harkness and Ottbrook. So a longer-term strategy towards reducing fugitive septic waste is not going to be a bad thing. Other questions?
Other questions?
One, I haven't followed for a couple of months. I haven't been following. Discussions with Camden.
Oh, yeah, Peter, you probably should go to a mic.
The mic.
So my question is, are discussions with Camden pretty much dead and gone?
I'm going to defer to these two.
Kaput?
We've worked it, we're still working it, we haven't given up, but it's, there was a select board meeting they had in end of November. And at that point, they had 4 members at the meeting. 2 definitely set against any taking Rockport wastewater. 2 maybe would consider it. So, again, we're still trying to have discussions, but if somebody doesn't want to stay married, it's hard to stay married. So, and I think we're moving forward on this thanks to this task force work, because we think that's in the best interests of the town to at least give ourselves a path if we cannot work things out with Camden. So.
And I think one other detail that's important to a lot of people to understand, at least the sewer users, is the difference in what Rockport is charged for their use through Camden versus what Camden residents are being charged. I forget the numbers, but it's big.
roughly 40% increase. If you look at what we would be paying in terms of user fees relative to what we are paying in user fees, it's about a 40% increase over what we would be paying with our own system.
Yeah. But I mean also, like, as of today, what Camden charges their own users, what is the user rate versus, is it like $6 or something versus 20 or
Camden
something?
charges us the same rate that they charge their individual users. And then, of course, our residents, our sewer users, on top of that, pay all the costs to operate our own system in Rockport to collect the wastewater.
Yeah, to be clear, the way that it works is Camden, when you pay your fee, which is the same rate that we're paying, they also get the piping worked on, the clean outs, the pump stations functioning, all the kinds of things that get the water to their wastewater treatment plant. We have that same system here in Rockport. We have all the current piping that goes to the pump stations. But the user fee we pay Camden doesn't pay for that. We have to pay for that separately, which is why we pay more, okay?
Maybe I was confused then, because I was thinking that the actual user rate per 100 gallons or whatever it is was like $20.
It is for
That's here.
us, because we're also having to
Right.
pay to move the waste around town through our own piping system. In Camden, that charge is included in the user fee. It's not included to us. We have to pay for that separately.
Right. Plus the infrastructure, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're just double paying, because we're paying
Right.
for the Camden users' infrastructure as well as our own.
That it?
That's
All right,
great.
thank you
very much.
Thank you very much. And for folks watching
Thank
and
you so
those
much.
here, we do have those public meetings, so there'll be more opportunities to ask questions, especially after you've looked at the presentations that'll be available online.
To begin.
All right. Should we take a break? Or do you want to take a break? Or if we take a 5-minute break, give the board a chance, because then we can march through the end of it. Okay. Where's this stuff going?
It's all the same.
Page 50.
Okay, we're back here after a brief break, and next item on the agenda is a hearing on 150 Park Street. John, do you want to?
Yeah, so this is obviously a continuation of the conversation that the board, I suppose, was first directly engaged in at your October meeting. And unfortunately, we are back at a point where further action by the board seems to be needed. As discussed at that meeting, the next step is a findings in order, which is a draft of which that our attorney has looked at as there's a couple key areas that would have to be filled out as we go through that, and Scott's here to offer if that's so the board's choosing. But largely, this is just for those listening who are not familiar, this is concerning the property at 150 Park Street, the red house that is right on the edge of Goose River. And again, the process has, while there was some initial great hope that we might be able to get resolution and some action on that property immediately, that hasn't happened. So what's before you is a hearing where you will, just to kind of go through the form here, you'll take note of who's present at the hearing and testified, and then after which evidence was provided, and that's already, I think, been pulled together, so we have the evidence that's provided. And then the findings of fact. So basically the facts that you're citing to make your decision, and then your decision, the reasoning effectively behind that decision. Moving on to the next page, the draft that you'd received from me had a couple blank spots in dates and times, so our attorney has filled in some of those, so I'll try to go through that, and Orion's here, we'll talk with him as well. But effectively, the building is to be secured and prevent occupancy or use within 24 hours. So obviously within 24 hours of this action. And then at that point, the next stanza, it talks about that you are given, the individual, the homeowner, is given a certain date by which they have to take action to the satisfaction of our code enforcement officer. The next section really just talks about the registry, Knox County Registry of Deeds. That's a simple one. And then the date. And the date for this, well, we'll talk about in a bit. But this court action can be appealed if within 30 days of the decision. So if a decision's made tonight, then I know, well, we have the leap year, so I'm not sure 30 days is March 12th, but
13th.
yeah, so by March 15th, you would have the 30 days would have elapsed, and this order couldn't be appealed. At that point, you could take all the action, and the town could remedy the solution.
Can I back up for just a
Yeah,
moment?
I went way beyond,
Yeah.
so.
No, but in a nutshell, we left this off, what was the meeting?
October. Yep.
Where we had agreed, or we had offered to the landowner to
Couple of
extend the previous decisions for a couple of weeks so that she could get, what was it, just
Her
somebody lined up to do the demolition, which, if I'm remembering correctly,
I think October, she needed to have somebody, Mike Sabatini came
Oh.
and
Mike
needed to
Scott
to
get.
was supposed to
verify,
visit
okay, that was it, to verify
confirm the,
Yeah.
the condition of it. Was it worth repairing or tearing down?
Right.
And then they had determined it was not worth saving.
Right.
And then she had, the next step would be to get the contractor to do the demolition that was certified for shoreland
Right.
work because of the Goose River going by the property.
Right.
So there was like,
And that was at our
was-
January meeting where we
Okay,
had
that was
that on
January.
our
Okay, yeah,
agenda,
yeah.
where Scott had offered to be,
to be,
she could hire any demolition contractor, and Scott would be the shoreline zoning.
he could
Got
just
permission from
supervise
DEP
that
to
part
do
of it
that,
to get past that technical.
but nothing's been done since then.
Yeah, so we gave it an extension then, I guess it was, to get that done. And nothing's just come to us, no permits have been requested or
Right. Well, no, you applied for a permit, but,
applied but not completed.
right,
But it was
because,
missing- It was missing
Right.
some pertinent things.
So
right.
it's, my recollection is just a couple of small things that needed to be done, and then we wouldn't be here.
That's been the story throughout.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. So there's, this is basically, this is a little bit of a different approach than usually how the board handles things, because this is a hearing. So much like a public hearing, there's a, those in favor, those against, scenario. So in sort of setting the stage, as I am right now, we're sort of not into the hearing portion of that. But Scott is here to provide testimony, of sorts, on some of where we are and where this stands. And then, as we said, we talked about the facts and then your reasoning. So we'll have to go through that once we get through it. But is there anything I missed there, Scott, Ryan?
You missed the fact the building's falling over on its side.
Apparently it's, if you look, yeah, for those who are watching at home, it's, everything's on its side there, but. Oh,
No,
gosh.
you've covered that quite well, actually.
Yeah, so should we formally convene the hearing and have Scott
Let Scott.
introduce himself, and let's have some testimony?
Okay. I'm Scott Bickford. I'm your plumbing inspector. I'm your code officer and your health officer. And we're here tonight to talk about the notice of violation that was given to Elizabeth Hart. And she participated at a hearing earlier on. And we followed through as you had tabled. And I met on the job site with Mike Sabatini. And I asked him if he'd walk to the middle of the floor, and he declined the offer. The cellar was full of water, and neither he nor I went upstairs. The windows are still not secured. The reason was she was going to take some action almost immediately after, but it never happened. Instead, she seemed to always have a complication that she couldn't quite get it done. And I can't really work well with promises that don't happen. So here we are, and the paperwork has been prepared to give this to the attorney. I do have with me the book with an overview of everything. I have a copy of findings of facts and conclusions of law, which the attorney will be looking for. And I'll entertain any questions.
And you have, I know in our packet were, a series of various emails and other documents that are related to this. And I guess I'd just like to state.
90% of this book is emails.
Yep, and I'd just like to state that that is part of our consideration and is part of the record here for this hearing, is everything that's in this packet.
Yes, yes, it's for the record.
Okay, any questions? Well, it's been a frustrating situation. We're sorry that it's come to this. I'm assuming that, I don't see Elizabeth here, and I don't think anybody else is here to provide testimony on this item, right?
I feel personally that I way overextended what a code officer should do in a case like this. Any other time, I would have, and I've done these before, I would have got right after it, but she always had an answer that gave me hope. And I stopped hoping after that meeting with Mike Sabatini when the next promise didn't happen. So
Yeah.
that's where we're at.
Yeah, and we're basically concluding that the building is structurally unsound.
Yes, the building is unsound, it is still, all windows are, well, most of the windows are open. The inside is deteriorated. It's a post and beam structure, 3 corners of the post and beam, fairly decent shape, One corner is totally bad, rotted, which Mike Sabatini had identified and looked at. A cellar had water in it, considerable amount, so we couldn't get down there. And as I say, I didn't even bother to go upstairs because the floors are so punky. And they moved, it was a danger to even walk. I stayed close to the outside walls.
So
And it
this could
presents a
be
risk to public safety.
That's what
I think it is a nuisance. The door that used to be there that was broken I think has now been taken off its hinges. There's signs possibly of access of somebody being in there.
That's what I was just wondering if there was a possibility that people would go in just to vandalize or to explore and they could get hurt and.
It wouldn't surprise me,
Yeah.
and I think that is a danger, an absolute danger.
Scott, did you, somewhere I read somewhere in the verbiage, it was a garage, is she gonna tear the garage down also?
There's been nothing said to me about the garage. I didn't really look at the garage as part of the problem.
Yeah,
I think the garage could be saved if you wanted to save it.
yeah.
It could be relocated if you wanted to relocate it. It's strictly the house, I think, that is the danger and the nuisance.
Yeah.
And to be clear, everybody, all parties were in agreement that they were willing and ready to tear it down, right? There's no dispute on that.
Well, at different times. I don't think we
Well,
all stood
currently.
together in a circle and
Yeah.
said that. But yes,
Yeah.
at different times, everybody's agreeable, and we have that in emails.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's, from what I had read, that's,
Yeah, and our last communications with her were all about finding a contractor to demolish the building.
Right, and Sierra gave a whole list of contractors, because she could only find 5. So Sierra gave a list, which is in here. And everybody that does this type of work isn't certified, and I know that. And wherever there's shoreland zoning, rivers, streams, or brooks, they need to have the state certification. Even if they put in septic systems, they have to be certified to do that. So that was my offer, to take the responsibility to make sure best management practices were in place before this happened. Because she said she couldn't find anybody that was certified. But now she has a whole list of people, and it's off the state website.
Yep.
And
And you've
good half of
you've
those-
been over backwards to try to,
I think
work
I've
with
gone
her.
beyond what I should have done.
I think as have we. I mean, we've had, this is our 3rd meeting, I think, or 4th, where this has been a topic.
And I'm really not very excited about taking the responsibility now for the best management practices. I think that's a liability that I was offering to take, and I'm not really willing to do that.
I think Orion offered to step in on a lot of this as well, too.
Yep.
And it's stalled.
And to Scott's point, that's, when these matters come up, the homeowner has to have some responsibility, right? And I think that's really what it comes down to. And while I appreciate Scott's willing to sort of extend his hand out there, really as a way to meet the board's requirement, desire to see we can move this along, but I would never have offered or suggested to Scott to do that, because that does put him in a place of responsibility that isn't really a good thing for us. He should really act as a third party and ensuring there's compliance with those DEP regs. And if he's not able to do that because he's working in some way with the property owner, it gets very messy, and we don't want to put him in that spot if we can help it. So I appreciate you did that, but I would.
She did decline my offer.
I was gonna say that was, yeah.
And after that, she couldn't find anybody. So.
Yeah. Well, we've got a set of findings of fact and conclusions of law.
Do we need to read each of those individually to put those into the record?
You could just simply accept this as written, or if you want to go through one by one, it's up to you.
I have more copies. You got the one I have
I have this one.
with the date on the bottom?
Yep, February 12th. Yep.
I have more copies if you'd like.
Yeah, I think for purposes, given our meeting schedule tonight, that if everyone's okay with that, we could just include this in the record, our findings of fact and conclusions of law. Does anybody object to doing that?
Did I get the good one?
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
So then, would we have a motion
So that
to
would-
accept these findings of fact and conclusions of law for purposes of resolving the findings in order?
Yeah,
Okay.
unless you edit them in some
Right.
way. Yeah.
It may be different.
Yeah,
Yeah, that has a date.
Yep.
Yeah.
I got the one with the date too. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, we're all good.
Yeah.
I beat you to it, Scott.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we have a motion
There you go.
to,
I make a motion that we add the findings of fact and conclusion of law into the evidence presented to the board for the findings in order for 150 Park Street, Rockport.
Second.
okay, any discussion? All those in favor? Okay. All right, thank you, Scott, for all the work on this, and,
So do we have to determine a date, or is it?
well, we have, let's see, we have the, I guess, it's probably good to just make clear on the record that we, it's ordered that, to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the building is to be immediately secured to prevent occupancy or use within 24 hours. Further ordered that to protect the health, safety, and welfare, the dangerous, unsafe, and unsanitary conditions associated with the dangerous building be abated no later than 30 days to the satisfaction of the town code enforcement officer. Such abatement shall include demolition and removal of the building. Be it further ordered that the town clerk shall record this order in the Knox County Registry of Deeds and cause attested copies of this order to be served upon the owners, occupants, and parties in interest as required by law. And be it further ordered that if this order is not complied with by March 15, 2024, the town manager is hereby authorized and directed to do all things necessary to effectuate the order, including municipal action to remove and/or demolish removal of the said dangerous building and nuisance. And I think those are the provisions we included, so. Okay, we're sorry it's come to this, but appreciate the good work that Scott, Ryan, and John have put together on this, so.
So,
Thank you.
just a quick comment. Orion, I see she wrote a couple emails like on January 3rd and 4th to you. She has never responded since then.
She responded today with a possible for Jeff. She told me. So I had a response from Ms. Hart that she was gonna potentially have this done, or a tentative date of March 30th. I don't have it in writing. I don't have a permit filled out. She said she was gonna come in tomorrow.
Okay.
Could be convenient. I don't know.
So if that happens, then,
If it happens, then great.
then we're all set. As long as it happens.
As long as it happens. So
Well,
what
right
this
now, the
does is that
dates
this is the
are,
15th,
yeah, the
right?
date is March
I
15th.
know, well, then that's what I'm asking, is if she comes in tomorrow and they files a permit and it gets approved.
If she can get it demolished by March 15th.
By March 15th, then John has the authority to go through his action of
Yeah.
demolishing on the town's record.
Yep.
Or working with her. If she has like an official date with a contract of the 30th, then, we wait. But if it hasn't happened, then we already have this in
Okay.
place.
Yeah, because I really don't want to see us spending the money to do it, but.
Sure, no.
No.
Me
But we
either.
also wanna-
And
Right.
did I
We
hear
have the
that
wiggle room.
you said emails went back and forth in
All right, I just
January,
wanted
and today is when you heard?
Today's when I received an email from her.
Okay,
About
okay.
I just wanted to clear that point up to make sure that, if something does happen in the next few days.
She's made no contact at all with me.
Yeah.
I don't think she likes me.
This process requires her to be served the notice of this hearing as well. So she is aware that this process is happening tonight and will take action as needed, so that being served by a Waldo County Sheriff has not moved the needle, so.
Yep.
No, I understand. I was just,
I'd like
just
to
wanted to
avoid it.
understand those points.
Yeah,
So that
no.
they're clear to everybody, especially to my brain.
Good place,
Because
good place to be,
I
yeah.
was a little confused.
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
all.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So just on that form, Denise, that you have there,
Mhm.
either, well, the signature form, either at least one of them we needed signed and printed from everybody.
I think we
want to do-
probably need to
I think we're gonna have to,
physically put the
Input.
findings of fact in here.
No, I agree to that.
And then I'll have, when Diane has that pulled together in one document, we'll give you all a rig to come in and sign
and
it.
we'll come in and sign it.
That's probably the easiest way to do it.
Yeah,
Soon.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah, tomorrow, well, yeah, tomorrow,
next day or two.
Wednesday, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Next is act on West Street Farmers Market at RES site.
Do we not want,
Did I skip something?
no, I was just gonna say we don't need Scott for I.
Which one's
Let's
on?
see. Dear, my minutes are.
Not really,
Okay,
I think we can, yeah.
okay.
So this is, well, Orion, I mean, this has been a long sort of desire of the Lesher Family Foundation to see activity occurring on the RES site, and this is sort of in that line of thinking. You can see the letter from MJ in support. You know, this is, it's a big it's a big asphalt space with a lot of potential until it's not an asphalt space, and then it still has potential. So I think the idea is to try to maximize, and as you know, the time that we have remaining with what's there, and also for that matter, you know, we haven't. There's not a lot of conflict. We don't, you know, going on in the space. SIF is no longer going to be operating the drive-in, so, and that's a different time of day anyway. So it's a win-win, it would seem.
Yeah. And just for the 2024 season, because we don't know what will be happening the following year in terms of construction, or the Lesher family doesn't
Yeah.
know.
Correct.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I move the board approve the West Street Farmers Market application at the RES site as presented for 2024.
Second, Jim. Any discussion? All those in favor? Great. Good, that'll be fun to have something happening out there.
Yeah.
Okay, next is act on construction approval for project in town right-of-way. John?
Yeah, so this has been a long, been a long road to get to this point.
Sorry, I was meaning to let them know that that was coming up, and
Yeah.
I haven't done that. Do you mind if that gets bumped a little bit?
Oh,
Is this
the-
the Main Street one?
This is the bugs.
The bugs. Okay. Yeah, do you want us to move on and we'll come back to that?
Yeah, are they planning to come up the street, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know, they didn't want to hear all our other,
I can't imagine why.
all right, next is act on land use ordinance amendments. Although, now Ryan, you're.
We'll let Orion text.
So, what do you want?
I want you to
Do you want me to
introduce this item for us.
plug it in? Okay, Jeff wants it plugged in.
Is it gonna work?
Let's see if this works. Okay. Right. Okay. Ready?
Ready.
Okay. So what you have in this packet are recommendations from the planning board to amend our land use ordinance to be in compliance with LD 2003. Everybody's got an opinion about LD 2003. I've received some emails as well as the planning board about not adhering to LD 2003. Well, it's not an option. So if we don't adhere to it, LD 2003 still rides. And then we have an ordinance that won't allow a project to be approved per LD 2003. So what that's going to result in is a developer suing us, appealing the planning board's denial, appealing the zoning board of appeals denial, and then going through the court system. So it's just going to be a long lawsuit in a debate. So in aims to avert that from happening, we've taken LD 2003, interpreted that into our land use ordinance, how it best fits, and now we've got a leg to stand on in an argument if there ever was a dispute. So that's broken up into a few categories. So there's a PUD, which is planned unit development, which is an ordinance that we haven't had in the past. So that's just another planning tool, which gives us more versatility in conversations with the developer. I'm not going to go through detail. I'm just going to go high level right now. And if you have questions, I can go into that. And then we've revised the
And is this all new, this planned unit development, this is all new?
This is all new. And then with the planned unit development, so part of LD 2003, if you wanted to take advantage of a density bonus, you would have to have at least 20% of your development as affordable. So what does affordable mean? And this was a conversation that we had with our planning board and with our attorney, and the best outcome was to create not just the definition that linked it, but to create a section in this. So that's where section 818 comes from the essence of it. So it gives us a little bit more of, in the findings of facts, conclusions of law with the planning board, we'll have a section that we'll formally go through that says, yes, that 20% at a minimum meets our criteria of an affordable housing. And then through the cluster development ordinance, we currently have one, but it's ineffective at present. So we've revamped it so they can actually work. The current issue with our cluster development is that it requires like 50% of that parcel to be locked in a buffer zone requirement. So in essence, what that means is nothing can be developed there. I understand what they meant by it, but what that does is if you've got a parcel, probably about half of that is unusable. So what it was supposed to be was that 50% set aside. It's its own thing, managed by the coalition, the homeowner association, and then the rest of that is to be developed with it all being clustered together. So the current ordinance didn't allow that to play out. So we cleaned that up so that the same thing happens, just worded differently. And then same with the cluster development, we added intensity density bonuses. In this ordinance, same as a PUD, which makes us compliant with LD 2003, if anybody wanted to utilize it for that provision. And then in the dimensional requirements table, so this is your 918, section 918 of the land use ordinance. There was a lot of talk about reducing lot size so that it will allow infill to happen, other developments to happen, so that's not so much of a burden on developers. Right now, in the current conversation that I'm having with developers, is that the numbers don't crunch, it doesn't pencil, as others have said. It doesn't work in the current table that we have to allow for a developer to make it financially feasible today. So it's reduced in those conversations, and I think one of the first workshops we had with the planning board was a conversation with a developer and another person that understands land use developments, and they agreed that reducing lot sizes will allow development to take place. So there's recommendations through here to reduce a lot in our dimensional table. And then same thing in the Part B of that table. This is just matching up with the first table, so allowing those reductions to go into play. And then we're removing a two-family dwelling unit item in here. Not to say that two-family dwellings isn't allowed, it's just it's a multifamily structure. That's what it is. So just calling it what it is and not a duplex.
So not having three categories, single family,
Yeah.
double family, and multifamily, just
Correct.
single or
Correct.
multi.
Okay, and then, so we did some amendments into chapter 900, and that's mainly from this table. You'll see in, there's a couple of sections here, max lot coverage for non-residential, building height. Some of those are, they're just linked to certain zones, or there's a note that it references. And then there's a bunch of NAs if you read through it, so not applicable. well, what does that mean? So it was an exercise that I went through with I don't have it on here to avoid confusion, but it was an exercise I did with our land use attorney on what does non-applicable mean? Can somebody actually argue that therefore it's not applicable, that I have to adhere to lot coverage now? So I wanted to clean all that up so we didn't have to have that confusion of a conversation. So pull those items out. If they're solely specific to a zone, they're now pulled out into the relevant zone. So that's what this next section here is in the 900s. And then residential housing unit ordinance, there's a concern with the additional dwelling units. Right now, nothing you can do, say, or whatever, just based on LD 2003, additional dwelling unit can be placed down in your backyard if you wanted it, or placed within your structure, your house, over your garage. However, if you can conform to our ADU ordinance right now, you can have one. However they're going to be used doesn't really make much of a difference, but we should keep an eye on it so we understand the structure of it. So this rental housing unit ordinance is anybody who has a rental unit has to register their unit, long-term, seasonal, short-term, and that's it. And then further, it fully pulls out the short-term rentals that they can operate within the zones that they already operate in. So
They can or they can't?
they can. They already operate in these zones anyway. So we shouldn't go in and say you can't operate here. That would create a giant problem.
We're not.
We're
trying
not
to
saying you
limit.
can't do it. And then some cleanup to our accessory dwelling units. So we had a bunch of ADUs or replacing ADU where it says accessory dwelling unit, and then adding in this line of H, either the principal structure or converted ADU shall be occupied by the owner of the property as their principal residence.
Could you say that once again?
Yeah, so, so H, either the principal structure or converted ADU shall be occupied by the owner of the property as their principal residence. And then we initially had, just out of unsurety on what these are really going to be, the first draft was a 600 square foot maximum that you could do. We're proposing to remove that because a few examples came into play that's too small. So out of trying to accommodate a few homes that want to come in, rental units, this allows that to take place. Now, where it gets interesting is that the accessory dwelling unit cannot be larger than your
That's
primary
what I was
structure.
wondering. So there's at least
The
some limit
primary.
on the size of
Correct,
the ADU.
correct. So
It's
you
just-
can't have an ADU that's much larger than your existing house or primary structure.
Mhm.
Or taller, if I saw
Correct,
something? Okay.
correct.
Okay.
And that is it. So do you have specific questions about any of these? And no, I've already said the planning board recommended these. So each of these are separate recommendations. So it's not one lump sum recommended. I think there's 7 right there. So there's 7 full recommendations.
Okay. And the
Okay.
planning board voted on those?
Yes.
Unanimously?
Yes.
Approved those?
Is there sort of any one nutshell way of saying what's the most impactful change?
A PUD
Okay.
and the cluster development. Those are the 2 most impactful that you'll see. Mind you, if we don't have sewage capacity, none of it matters.
Yeah.
So, just,
And it just occurred to me, like, if you've got a property that's on a private septic system,
no.
and they want to have an accessory dwelling unit, if their septic system is a 2-bedroom and they want to add another bedroom,
So
they have
that,
to get their sewers.
correct, yeah, so that's a
septic
conversation with the code enforcement officer. He'll pull the file to see what your system is, or you'll provide your file of what your septic system can handle, and then determination will be made at that point. So if you wanted to, you might have to upgrade your septic system.
And I know we had, as far as public sewer systems go, we had the unit up on Pascal that recently was approved to tie in to this,
Mhm.
the unique situation they had, so
To tie into the sewer system,
Yeah.
yes.
so we'll still do all that kind of stuff if,
Oh, yeah.
as needed, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I encourage
Yeah, and
everybody
that
to
would
tie
become
into
another
sewer.
equivalent unit? Would an ADU become another equivalent unit under ours?
Probably. I think so. I think so.
Give that some thought.
Because it would be its own structure. So I think if memory serves right, it's like if you had, let's just say 3 bedrooms, but one's its own entity and another one is its own entity, but 2 and 1, then those are 2 equivalent users.
And unrelated people living in each.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And I think just to sort of, this is set up as if we're going to vote tonight on these, but my understanding from John is that we don't need to vote tonight. We can, I think we probably have some public comment here. I don't know if you all are intending to make some statements. And then we can sort of take that under advisement, consider in the next month, before our next meeting, how we move forward.
Oh, that sounds,
Does that
Yeah.
sound-
yeah.
So I'm just so you're aware of all of that, and I'm not going to try to insinuate to derail any of that. If you want to make a recommendation next month, I would. The reason it was here today is so that if there's some issue, red flagging, there's a timetable now to where I can get that before the planning board again to make those formal changes and recommendations so that we can still make the June
So if
ballot.
we see something in these provisions that we would want changed,
Yes,
rather than waiting till our March meeting to do
correct.
that.
Because if you,
Okay,
I don't know the timetable would work for the March.
okay.
Could be wrong, but based on my math, I don't think it would work at that point.
Okay,
Because all this would have to go back to the planning board and then back to us to be approved, to get on the ballot.
Yeah,
Okay. And that could
yeah,
blow that out of the water.
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, but there's 7 segments, so if one of them doesn't fit.
Correct.
Yeah, and I
we
think
can
obviously
do the other
the,
6 and just do the other one later if we absolutely have.
You're
to,
correct.
right?
You're correct.
and I think it's fair to say that the rental unit section isn't necessary for LD 2003.
It's not necessary for LD 2003. I'll be clear of that, and I've been clear about it. LD 2003 creates some situations that we don't know what's going to happen.
Right, the concern with what happens to the accessory dwelling units.
And, I mean, for the record, I mean, I don't have anything that says short-term rentals are negative. I don't have any of that. It does offer an area of revenue for people. I don't think anybody here would be opposed to that. But if this ADU thing that the state says we have to adhere to creates a massive problem, then this rental unit, housing unit would allow us to track it, understand it, and then make a more informed decision at that point in time.
And I think that's the primary benefit of that provision, because it really is just registration. It's not
just
limiting what
registration.
anybody can do with their property, it's just so we can gather the data and understand what's happening in our community.
Correct.
And I know I've seen things in the press lately about a lot of communities dealing with this very, very thing.
Yes.
And I used to have a place up in Bar Harbor back in the 90s, and they instituted a registration process and all that stuff back then that I had to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the registration process is sort of, it's a way for a community to just become familiar with what is happening in its community. It's not intended to ban or limit or
No.
cap what our residents can do to make money, because we want our residents to succeed and do well.
Yes.
There was one other element that I remember, the public safety element, to make sure, I know I had to make sure if I was gonna rent it out, that
Yeah.
it had to have fire extinguishers, and the fire chief came in and just made sure all the normal safety stuff was
Yes.
there. Is that,
Yeah, so if you're going to have a rental unit, you will need to have a certificate of occupancy, hands down. This right here will codify that.
okay,
So there's no way that you can really skirt the system. If you want to rent it out, fine, make sure you have your certificate of occupancy.
it's not limiting the option to do it, it's just making sure that it complies with safety
Correct.
codes.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah. All right, well, with the caveat that we really are trying to get ourselves out of here at a reasonable hour, if public comment, if we can.
Oh,
Yeah, well, and we've got unfortunately more. Well, anyway, we've asked that public comment be limited to 2 minutes, and
We've got 3 people.
Yep.
Yeah, you have more than 2 minutes for each of us.
Okay.
Let's just get started and
Okay, public comments?
Hi, I will be under 2 minutes.
great.
A couple of things. Number
You could
one,
introduce yourself, please.
Vic Steinglass, I live in the village. Bar Harbor is not Rockport.
Oh, no, I was just saying.
Okay, just let's not make the comparison because it's an entirely different scenario. Okay, we should do what's appropriate for Rockport. We don't care what Bar Harbor does. Okay, we don't care what Rockland does. We should do what's right for Rockport. Okay, a few years ago, we had a vote. The town people were asked if we want to have an ordinance that controls short-term rentals.
Okay.
Voters voted 70% that we did not want that ordinance. That's a significant margin. And here we are asking for another ordinance that deals with short-term rentals, but now we're bringing in all rentals. So we're going to regulate all rentals. Okay, what's happened in the last few years? What has changed in Rockport that says all the voters were wrong the last time? We need regulations. We need an ordinance that is going to control rentals. We don't need another ordinance. How long have Rockport residents been renting their homes? I've been living here for 50 years, and it was going on for 50 years before that. We survived. How many complaints are there? Hardly any. Police get no complaints. One or two neighbors may have a problem, but one or two neighbors have problems with long-term owners of properties, let alone renters. So, what has changed that we need an ordinance that we didn't have before? More bureaucracy, more keeping track of us. We don't need that. We got along just fine without it for 100 years. Also, how is this ordinance that's being proposed relating to rentals going to make the average Rockport citizen's life any better? Not at all. Okay? We got along fine without it. We don't need it. I don't want to be tracked by my computer. I don't want to be tracked by Orion. Okay? The last thing is a statement from Einstein. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. We're not at the state of insanity. We're not over and over. We're just at the first over. And we're on our way to doing just what he was saying. We don't need a new ordinance. The rest of it, and we don't also need, and I object to the fact that this is being buried, a whole new ordinance is being buried in just upgrading our land use ordinance. It's not. It's a new ordinance. It should be dealt with individually, and also I feel it would be very unfair to the planning board for all of the time that they put in and have this entire thing fall apart because the voters don't want to have their rentals regulated. And then the whole thing is going to fall apart as opposed to just having a rental ordinance by itself, standalone, and not try and sneak it in through a major housekeeping. And the only part of 2003 that mentions short-term rentals is if a town decides that it needs an ordinance for short-term rentals, it can have one. That's all it says. And we already decided a few years ago that we didn't. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
I go with that guy. I'm Marcia. Whoop. By the way, there was no notice in the papers about this meeting, and it's required. Vic and I went to the planning board when they were discussing all of this, and we actually wondered ourselves, whatever happened to the Ordinance Review Committee? They were never part of this process. Okay. On January 25th at 8:25 p.m. at the planning board meeting, the chair said, there will be no families left here. If we allow vacation rentals, BlackRock is buying them all. And this was said 2 years ago, too. And you know what? First of all, it's not BlackRock. I called BlackRock, and the secretary fell off her chair, hysterical, laughing when I asked if they're buying houses in Rockport. Then when she regained her composure, she said, what you want is Blackstone, not BlackRock. So I called Blackstone. Blackstone is the world's largest asset manager. Their portfolio is concentrated in Sun Belt markets, which they believe continue to benefit from outsized population, job and wage growth, and their holdings in Maine, get this, between 2018 and 2022, 0. They're not buying houses here. Then, 2 years ago, some people said, vacation renters are noisy and cause problems. Okay, I talked to Chief Gagne. In 2022 and 2023, 0 complaints about short-term rentals in Rockport. Now, the director of Maine Housing, which is an apolitical organization, his name is Dan Brennan, and a man named Greg Payne, who heads the Office of Policy Innovation and the Future, had an interview on NPR. They stated that, and that radio program is called The Cost of Living. I'm like, should I talk faster? No. Okay. And they said, these are their quotes, these are people who are experts in this field. This is a national problem, our housing shortage, our shortage of affordable housing that predates the recession. We need to add more supply. Our housing stock is old. We are limited by lack of public sewer and hindered by zoning and a lack of labor supply. These are the real problems that we have. Don't blame vacation rentals for these problems. They're long-standing. Now, I really think you're putting the cart before the horse with these actions. We are supposed
Excuse
to...
me, I must interrupt because we haven't taken any action. We're listening to you. We're taking public comment.
Okay, with these ideas. We are supposed to rework our zoning and be in coordination with the comprehensive plan. It is stated so in LD 2003. Growth areas are locally designated growth areas identified in a comprehensive plan which meets consistency guidelines of the growth management program. Has anybody even looked into that? The Maine State website says, this law, LD 2003, is designed to remove unnecessary regulatory barriers to housing production in Maine, while preserving local ability to create land use plans and protect sensitive environmental resources.
Marcia, I must interrupt. It's been 5 minutes. How much longer do you have?
I have 2 cards longer. Zoning ordinances adopted in a municipality would have to be consistent with both a local comprehensive plan and LD 2003. And our comprehensive plan is dated 2004. You are making decisions without a comprehensive plan that even talks about what the future is going to be. Big mistake. Lastly, study of the Maine State Housing Authority, the Governor's Office of Policy and Innovation and the Future, along with the Department of Maine Economic and Community Development, studied short-term rental inventory as share of total housing by county. Knox has 5.2% of housing as short-term rentals, 5.2%. Orion did a study. He may have used AirDNA, because I know that he said that he hired a company to see about rentals here. Orion suggests that there are 2,600 dwelling units in Rockport and 150 vacation rentals or short-term rentals. That's 5% of our dwelling unit. You're doing all of this and making hardships for our residents for 5% of our dwelling units here.
Thank you for your comments.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Claire Tully, and I live in the Village. Obviously, feelings are running high, about these proposed changes. And I think part of it is because it was just 2 years ago that we dealt with this. There was the vote. There were extensive workshops that took place. And there was a lot of sharing of information at that time, which did give the town a better sense around the rentals in addition to the work with the consultants. And so when we hear about, we need the registration to get from more familiar with what is happening in the community, it seems a little disingenuous, frankly, because so much information was shared at the time. And although registration sounds innocuous, when you look at the language of this registration clause, I don't think it's anything that you would apply to a commercial business. And we're talking about homeowners, mom and pop operations, people like me. I have an apartment, a second unit in my house, and we've rented that over the years, and it's helped with taxes and college, et cetera. But some of the provisions are an annual registration fee, all kinds of penalties, daily fines if you have minor violations, if you have major violations. You can, if you don't fully comply with the registration, you can be prevented from renting your house for 3 months. Now think about that. In the summer season, you were not able to rent your house for 3 months and you're relying on it to help pay your taxes or your other expenses. It's really overreaching. Putting a number on every single thing you do, posting something next to your door, and all, again, in the absence of problems as documented by our police chief, by our CEO. We've also talked to Scott. We've talked extensively to others on the select board, et cetera, to try and find out where this is coming from. Clearly, there are a few members of the planning board that feel very strongly about this. But I don't know that that is representative of what the select board feels, and certainly Rockport voters, because that 70% vote, a lot of that was from residents who just don't like excessive regulation in the absence of a problem. If it's not broke, don't fix it. And we don't have any indication that it's broke. The other thing that I like to mention, and this makes me feel kind of sad and also conflicted, because, you know, what we've seen tonight is really a lot of progress, a lot of work, you know, to move forward, you know, a new wastewater treatment plant that could be instrumental in creating more lower cost housing, which we need. And as Orion has pointed out, you know, we need the sewage capacity to do that, right? That's what the development on Route 90 is, you know, all about. We need more of that. So to take this and tie this in to the other, you know, affordable housing, workforce housing, things that a lot of voters want, is going to hurt the chances of this passing. So it seems like a very bad time to pick this fight. And you're not just hearing this from people that have rentals, but Richard Remsen, who is the chair.
I just would like to clarify, though, because I heard the same comment from Marcia. These are 7 separate items that will be on the ballot as separate items. This will be its own item. It's not going to be this entire package as one voting item. So the voters will be able to say no to rental, yes to others, if that's what ends up being on the ballot.
So it would be a completely separate question?
Yes.
As to rentals, because
yes.
My
And each of
understanding
these
was that
items will be-
the chair of the ordinance committee had a concern about this being included with
I
it.
don't know about that, but
Well, I believe there was a letter to the select board about this. So I think that that's very important, that it didn't. Yeah, from Richard
Yeah,
Renson.
Richard.
That it indeed be clearly separate from this, because I'm afraid that
Well,
it could
that's
tarnish.
a fact. That's
Pardon?
a fact that it is separate. It will be separate on the ballot if it ends up on the ballot. We haven't even
Okay,
taken a vote
so
on
if it
that.
ends up on the ballot, it is a separate question from
as is each of
affordable
these.
housing or workforce
P-
housing.
Well, no, PUDs will be separate from cluster unit developments, from changes in the density. There's a package of 7 items here that the planning board has proposed, and each of those will be its own ballot item.
Okay, well, that is certainly a better situation, because I don't think we want to sabotage an initiative that has been long awaited. But I would urge all of you to really go back. Denise, you've got the most familiarity. You were here the first time with it and really looked at it. But I would urge all of you to go back. I think you might have been at the planning board meeting the other night. But some of the sentiments that were expressed about restrictions on private property rights, I found really kind of staggering. So I don't think that is what most Rockport residents think, and I think our homes are, in many cases, our most valuable assets.
Claire,
So-
this is 6 minutes. How much longer do you have?
Oh, I am just wrapping up. Thank you for your forbearance. I appreciate that.
We appreciate the comment. Thank you.
I know
for-
it's a late night. Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, any other public comment on that item? Okay. So since we.
Oh, any questions online? Has anybody put questions in online?
Negative, hang on, yeah, that's the one. Chat, 0.
Okay.
Between 7 and 11 people.
So, as I indicated, we do not have to vote on this tonight. We heard some comment, we can sort of mull that over and bring this back up at our March meeting. Is there anything anybody else would like to say on this agenda item? Okay.
So what's the timing on it? If we have any, Ryan needs to get it back to the planning board.
If we want to make changes to what's in here, if we want to approve it, not approve everything in here, but approve some, I think we can do all of that at our March meeting.
And I'll talk about the dates and everything tomorrow, verify everything.
The main thing is you got to order the questions, so you have to be able, thank you, Jeff. You have to be able to get to a point where you've set the stage for your warrant, because your warrant was what you approve in your meeting in April. So that's really what the next meeting is about, is sort of rounding the corner and figuring out where you may go, not necessarily, so let's just say, for example, you had a question that you wanted to have ordered, to change the name of Main Street to, I don't know, not Main Street. You could order that question, and then by the time you come around to your meeting in April, you can say, we're not gonna include that on the warrant, because that meeting, your April meeting, is when this is what's in, this is what's out. So it's not restrictive at that point in terms of that question. It's more of trying to allow the clerks to get a point where they can start building their ballots. That's really what it's about. So.
Okay.
So if we wait till the next meeting
My understanding from John is we can do that.
to review this and approve it and all that.
Yeah, you could create the question, and then you could decide at any point, no, we don't want to do that, or yes, you do.
But
So-
if there were changes we wanted to make, is that
That's-
where we get into complications? If that were the case, is there possibility for us to have
We could
an
have a special
emergency meeting or a special meeting
Yeah.
to keep on the timeline,
Yeah.
track?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have an escape route
Yep,
if we
Community
need to.
approval
Okay.
would be a 7-step approval, because it's 7 sections.
right.
Okay.
Yep.
And I would just, I'm not speaking for or against this, but I would say that in general, select boards usually are not as engaged on land use issues. Usually it's because you're in the middle of budget, right? That March time, you're gonna be so in-depth in the numbers. You're usually the land use process, and we talked about the ordinance review committee, there's sort of like two different ships going on at the same time. So there's that part of it. There's sort of an independent effort that's often going on, but that doesn't mean ultimately you decide, the 5 of you decide what goes on the ballot. And then, from there, it's up to the voters. There'll be public hearings of what's on the ballot. That whole process would go on, but wherever you choose to put on the ballot. And then, of course, you have November, which is going to, we'll talk a little bit, but that's a big election. We have a presidential election, you'll have tremendous turnout. I think this June will also have a big turnout, because there's a number of issues that
Very important.
we're going to be
ones,
talking about on a town side. Nothing to do with this raft of ordinance changes, but
And
as
obviously-
we saw earlier tonight, there's a lot to
obviously
talk
the
about.
planning board has given a lot of work to this.
Sure.
And they're much more expertise.
Yeah, and I'd be hard pressed to start to
Yeah.
get into the nitty gritty of
Yeah.
any of one of those sections,
Right.
changing that, because it's all meant to hold together.
Okay, but I think reviewing it's good.
Okay,
Okay,
all right, I think that's it for that
So table-
agenda
Motion to
item.
table?
table this.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to do, I don't think we need to do
Okay.
anything.
Okay.
We'll just table it till the next meeting,
Yep.
right?
I think, Mrs. Bug? So we can move back to the item on the construction approval for project in town right-of-way. Ryan, do you want to, I don't know how,
Yeah, if you don't mind.
So it's on
I.
page 122.
Yeah.
You got it.
So, are y'all ready?
Yep.
All right, cool. So what my office needs in order to process a permit is approval from the select board to operate within the right of way. So Kathy and her husband Jay, they've got a project of wanting to put a retaining wall in the front yard area that happens to be within.
Or replace the one that was
or
there.
replace the one that was there, and they're at a kind of a fork in the road where they just need your approval. Some items in our office fell through the cracks. That's why it's taken so long, and I do apologize about that. But quite simply, as long as the select board is okay with this happening within the right of way, there's a concern with the French drain, which Kathy, you've talked with their hay runner now?
Yes, hay runner,
runner.
yes.
So hay runner's been in contact with them to devise a plan on the French drain. So in your approval, putting a condition with that French drain would be recommended from my perspective. Because
Okay.
how it currently drops on this page, you can see.
It's not showing up in that picture.
What
It's
is a
on the
French
other
drain?
side.
Yeah, so the rainwater on the house, it collects into a gutter system and then that's buried and then it dumps it. So right now, where it's
Like
dumping
underground,
out,
with
is-
gravel
It's
and all that.
dumping out right here on the sidewalk.
So it dumps onto
Currently.
the sidewalk?
And so this is to get it, not to dump on the sidewalk,
To
but
dump into the catch
tie into
basin.
the catch
Right.
So
basin,
it'll go down
Right.
into the drain,
There's-
stormwater system.
stormwater drains.
And those catch basins in that area are Maine DOT owned, they're not town owned.
It's so bizarre.
So it would need their
So,
approval.
so Maine DOT has a permit application form, I think hay runner's been involved,
Yes.
I think.
Yeah.
So it's merely a question of, there was some initial, when this was first looked at, DOT was, we don't want anything to, that could take months, and after further, conversation, we'll just get the permit application for you and we'll do it tomorrow. So I think that they're much more open to this idea, and obviously we don't want drains running on our sidewalks. That's not a good idea in town of Rockport.
Yeah.
So if you can deal with two things at once, so be it. And that's the only thing that from our side of it.
And as I remember, there was a timber retaining wall or something like that
Yes,
there.
yes.
Yeah,
Railroad
with, and it used to have a sun porch sort of built above it.
That was before
Oh,
my
before
time.
you, okay,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
know about
yeah.
that.
Yeah, yeah,
Not when we purchased.
Yeah, yeah, because
so.
that was torn off, which made it look much nicer.
So,
So everything in your office, you're satisfied with everything, you've got everything you need, you just need select board approval.
That's it.
Because it's in the town right away, right?
So moved.
okay,
But I,
Kim, and we want that condition in there too.
Yeah.
Move the board.
I should read that.
I move the board approve the project in the town right away with the condition the owners first obtain approval from Maine DOT to move their drainage from the sidewalk surface to the catch basin on Main Street.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All those in favor?
How do you-
Yes, that's a real yes, okay. Well,
There we go.
it's approved.
So done.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you for your time.
Wow.
patience.
Was
and-
Too easy.
Yes, it was. Okay, thank you.
Really
We'll be in
appreciate
touch
it.
tomorrow, okay?
Okay, sounds great.
Okay, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
All right,
Yeah.
Jason, finally, and Joe. We have got EMS department creation for fiscal year '25 budget.
You're Jason, right? I
Yes.
believe you are.
But
Time
we
to wake
waited
up.
long, we waited so long.
Time to wake up.
9 o'clock, 3 hours.
I'll have dinner when I get home.
Intriguing information. So just to maybe kick this off, so the board held its workshop on the 5th in this same space. And I think that, there was a lot of good information shared that night. I was disappointed we weren't able to get those two other chiefs to provide their perspectives. We also received a letter, the board received, and town staff received a letter from Rick Petrie from Northeast Whole Health Services this weekend to provide I think, some color from Rick's perspective. And certainly, as I mentioned, Rick and I go way back on this conversation, so, Rick certainly has some history here too. We also, since that night, there was a couple of things we noticed around the budget. And so just as an update, we noticed as we went through that night, for example, the EMS equipment line and the capital items, that total didn't carry through for the total capital items, so we've updated that. Megan's here as well, so she worked with me on this. And then we made one other change, which is a change, I talked to Jason about this, so even though it says department head, the idea of starting up the service or starting the hiring of staff in August, while the time to hire and all that works itself out, it would probably be better and more impactful from the town's perspective if it lined up a little bit more closely with the West Rockport Fire Station project and that project's completion. So the revised numbers on here, in terms of wages, reflect that date being pushed forward another 4 weeks. So I think those are the changes in terms of what we've discussed.
So
yeah.
So the fire station completion is expected
September, October.
Oh. Thank you.
Yeah, and obviously we're
Anything can happen.
February 12th, so we don't yet have any timber. There's a lot still to be done over there, but the last thing we're hearing from Maine Coast Construction, George at Maine Coast, is that they think they can hit the dates that we've talked about in our contract. So that's, if we didn't have that, then we'd have to start talking about some other issues in terms of housing and staying overnight and how do we work that through, and just seems that seems another hurdle that we don't need to climb over, and the hurdles are high enough as it is. So.
All right, so we did have the workshop, listened, learned a lot, asked questions. We did not receive public comment at that meeting. We have since received some written communications, as John indicated, from Rick and Joe Moore.
Yeah, sorry.
So that sort of gives us a more flavor for some of the concerns and competing issues on this. It's a big decision for our town. I think we sort of get 2 bites at the apple in a way. We get tonight, which would be authorizing the town manager to include this in the town budget, the proposed town budget. But again, we'll be reviewing the budget, and that'll be another opportunity to sort of consider this. But as we heard at the workshop, there are a lot of concerns with the state of our EMS service, and a strong feeling by Chief Peasley, our town manager, Kim Graffam, who's been very involved in this issue over the years, that it is time for us to go out on our own and provide our own fire-based municipal EMS service. So that's sort of, in a nutshell, what the gist of the discussion at our workshop was. Do we have anyone here who wants to make any public comment? Okay. Jason, do you want to say anything else at this point?
I think we've covered it more than enough.
Yeah, we know your
from all aspects.
Important feelings on this issue. Kim, did you want to?
Just some clarifications on the letters.
Mm-hmm.
In Mr. Petrie's letter, he said I stated that the contract said for 3 ambulances. I said no such thing. I did not mention contract at all at the workshop. I mentioned a meeting in July for the EMS Review Committee where it was presented that their staffing levels to meet the terms of their contract, and that's just a clarification on that. And that's at 3554 in the meeting if you want to go back and review.
Anybody else have anything they want to comment on, or do?
I don't know if it's helpful or not, but the whole idea of moving down this path, I'm assuming came from the people who actually are more involved in it all. Like, it's not like a select board's like, hey, you know what we should do? We should
No,
have our own
no.
ambulance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we're listening to
Because
the
I think sometimes
experts in our
people
community.
will think that select board is just coming up with these wonderful ideas and trying to,
No, we.
so I'm just saying that
yeah.
as a clarification.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're definitely listening to the experts in our community on this. Okay, well, do I have a motion?
I move the board authorize the town manager to include the draft EMS FY '25 department budget into the municipal budget and further endorse the town manager and fire chief to work with their colleagues in surrounding communities to establish mutual aid response and a method for transitioning into municipally based EMS services in the region currently served by Northeast Mobile Health Services.
Second.
Any discussion?
Sure. I still have a concern about being able to hire the people. I mean, that even Ellsworth said that's a big concern. So, I mean, to say, yes, we're just gonna go ahead and by December have enough people worries me. You know, and it still worries me. I mean, I understand you're gonna have mutual aid response, but, you know, you do run into those instances where you have something going on in Lincolnville and something going on in Rockland, and then Route 17 gets a crash. I mean, is there really enough coverage? I mean, I just want to make sure that, you know, if we put our ambulance in our house and Rockland has theirs, you know, and we still don't know what Camden's response is to all of this, you know, are we covered? And those are just concerns, and I've had people reach out to me with these concerns, so.
Yeah, it's, again, from day one, again, when you asked about this, how it started, I mean, Camden started this ball rolling about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, with their fire chief and firefighters presenting not quite in depth that we've done, but starting their own fire EMS service with transport. So where we were, we jumped on to the same bandwagon, and that's where we are today. So that's kind of where we are today. So we need them to get on board eventually to work with them, having the 2 ambulances, working with Rockland as well as other agencies in the area. If you look at the budget, the budget that Megan helped us with, the pay that we're offering, the benefits that we're offering are definitely going to outweigh most agencies, not only in this county, but far and wide. There's no guarantee, obviously, but I can assure you almost weekly I am receiving phone calls. I've been in several meetings with firefighter medics that are coming from an hour away to meet with me, that are very interested in this startup, with the pay, with the benefits that we're offering, the way that we're gonna run it. There's been a large outreach. I'm not saying we're not gonna have problems or bumps in the road, but rough numbers, I am not super concerned with hiring 4 medics and 2 firefighters at this time.
Okay. Just want to make sure, because, I mean, the hiring field isn't always the greatest.
Absolutely agree.
All right.
But again, John and Megan and I sat 2 weeks ago and compared the pay. I think you went as far as Southern Maine to Presque Isle. All these departments are advertising, and we are, I'm not saying we're going to be the best of the best, meaning pay, but we are definitely outpacing almost all the departments out there. So we're going to potentially offer a start-on a bonus, a hiring bonus. So we're adding these extra benefits to get those people in, to get the right people in to do it.
All right, well, those are just some concerns, so as long as we're just looking at this as, initially as putting it in the draft fiscal year 25, I mean.
Correct.
It doesn't hurt to continue down this path and reviewing it, so.
I think something I heard that helped me understand a little better is the notion that the schedule that we're providing for these medics and firefighters is a 24-hour schedule, so it allows us to basically recruit statewide.
Correct. So it would be a 124-hour shift, 2 days off, 124-hour shift, and a 4-day off, similar to what Rockland's doing now, and many other agencies out there. I think we talked to probably 15 people, and I think one person would prefer to do the 12-hour shift. Everybody else, including the 2 full-time guys now, would prefer to go to a 24-hour shift.
So, well,
Okay.
Anything else?
And they'd be doing things more than just sitting and
Correct.
waiting for the 911 call to come.
That's correct. There's a whole list of things that, again, you had asked, someone had asked about what they were doing, and, you know, in the article, and I've never said that Northeast doesn't do any of those things. Someone asked a question, I answered what we would be doing, and that's the list that I provided 2 weeks ago.
Week
ago.
ago.
And that's the list. I mean, there's a variety, I mean, there's more above and beyond that list that we're gonna do. That's just what we were asked, to provide a list of what we're gonna do, and that's what I did.
Any other discussion? Okay, ready for a vote? All those in favor? Okay, great. Thanks,
you guys
everyone.
very
Thanks,
much.
Jason.
Does anybody know where Camden stands in this grand scheme of things?
They're planning to discuss through their budget process, as I understand. That's part of what makes this a little bit difficult, right? And it made it difficult 10 years ago too.
Yeah.
How do you get 4 towns to all agree on the same concept of something, whatever it might be? Dump, EMS, police, fire. I mean,
Yeah.
we all do it. I mean, think about our days we were in Hope, Jim. I mean, that we thought completely differently than things happen now, right? So I don't think it's going to be clean in terms of how any of this works. You know, it's just, what I keep hoping, and I'm listening to what Camden says, and they're working. And so we're working, and wherever our outcome is, we'll meet at the end and make the best of our solution, I guess, as 2 towns. I will say that talking with other administrators and leaders in other towns, I mean, they certainly are on the impression that as Camden and Rockport go, they sort of have to follow. That's always been what's been said. I don't necessarily believe that, because I know Hope and Lincolnville have got strong opinions too. But the call volume is hard to argue. The numbers don't lie. So, but we want to be collaborative, not take it or leave it either, and I think that's the approach we've got to take with everybody, whoever it is, whether it's Rockland, Camden, Hope, Appleton, whoever.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Now, skipping down, so we're done with the action items, moving to discussion item B, investment policy, internal control policy.
Yes. So this was out of a conversation that I think, Denise, you had some conversations in public with residents and those who previously had maybe served on the investment committee and probably other entities. And we have an investment policy. We have, that sort of speaks to a certain level of oversight. But we've obviously changed, our charter has changed. So there's some time to perhaps take another look past on that. And then, as usually these conversations go, when I talk to Denise, we talk about one thing, and then before you know it, there's like 8 other things that it's connected to. And Megan and I have had some longer conversations about the need to update our internal control policy, which is an effort that she took on a number of years ago. But our operation has changed a great deal over the last few years. And so I'd like to maybe ask if, because this is all part of the budget, it's part of that conversation. If it comes up in budget, I certainly wouldn't run away from the question. But this is sort of my wink and a nod to the board to say, if you're okay with it, I'd like a little bit of time. Obviously, the budget comes first, and we have, as we just have been talking, there's a lot to go on that level. But I'd like to get us some time so that Megan and I can maybe get to work on this and bring back some revisions that work for today and work for the type of town office that we're operating in 2024. Because, the policy that we've written was really trying to protect the 2019, 2018 town office. And I think we've changed some things, we've updated some things. We maybe don't need to worry so much about who's getting the mail every day. Police escorts to the bank don't seem necessary. Those officers are busy enough as is. Things, things that we can change. And I think there's already a list going. So if we could maybe get a little bit of time and come back this summer with some changes, and set ourselves up, that would be my hope, if the board's okay with that.
Yeah, I think on the internal control policy, and then I think the question with the investment committee idea, and maybe it'll all get addressed there, but right now we have significant sums of money. The Weidman Fund sort of was one that came to mind as we're looking at the EMS program, that are being managed and overseen by an investment advisor, I assume. And we used to have some town residents who were part of an investment committee that would sort of act as just oversight to make sure that the best decisions were being made in the town's interest. And we no longer have that investment committee, and it does feel like we should somehow fill that gap with someone who's paying attention. And, I have all the respect in the world for everything Megan is doing for us, but it's in the everything she's doing for us, which is lots. And I think that's a lot to put on her, to have her overseeing those investment accounts. So.
And when we discussed that, when the investment committee had gone away, there was a thought that the budget committee might be able to take on some of those responsibilities. Well, in the change of the charter, that's really not, there's a potential that the budget committee isn't the same type of budget committee it had been, which is really dictated by their own workings, not by, external forces. And I guess my point is that you don't want to have, if you're going to try to establish a policy that is about consistent oversight, you can't do that with the peaks and valleys, that the potential of how the budget committee could work by charter. So that's sort of, so it all needs
so
the once
to be
over.
determined, and I get anyway, that with the budget season coming up, this just isn't the time to be wholesale reviewing and revising what needs to be a document that a lot of thought is given to. So
that's my hope. Yeah.
Worth putting it on the radar.
Yeah, that's really sort of the point of it on this agenda item, is just as being on our radar. Great. Last is comprehensive plan discussion.
Jeff, I just like to make sure you're awake. All right. Well,
let me just quickly interject, because Marcia's here, and I just want to clarify that when we met in July, at the end of July, where we asked Orion to sort of take on the task of drafting the comprehensive plan independent of the comprehensive plan committee, that was not intended to take the comprehensive plan committee out of the process. It was at that point intended to be a recognition that maybe we could have a cleaner, easier drafting process if our sort of town expert who we hired to do this project took on that task. And then the continuing expectation is once that's done, then it will be reviewed and input will be provided by the comprehensive plan committee. So just for folks to understand, if it was done gracelessly, I apologize. It really was intended as a way to try to expedite the drafting of the comprehensive plan.
Sure. And to recap further on that, the history and the water resource section each took, I think, four or three meetings with that committee, just because there's different people's opinions, so working through that is complicated.
We did have a worldwide pandemic, too.
Well, in the editing stage, we were not quite that far, but when we first started it, and that was hard with Zoom and everything. So, but this is a streamlined approach, typing it all up just from data collected, opinion on the data provided from the state. So what they do is they give you a data package. They call it a data package. It's a PDF with links, and then you got to collect all the data yourself. So it's not as convenient as a data package. So collect all the data. put that into some kind of a format so it's easily digestible, and then interpret it. So you get your conditions currently, and then your analysis of your conditions, and then your recommendations. So for the most part, that's kind of how each of these sections are structured, similar to the financial capacity that you have. So I've gotten done all but a few, which are, I'll have to pull that different page up. It was transportation, land use planning, and the future land use planning, and then there's another section on the public participation that I have to type up.
Public facilities and services.
And public facilities, yeah. So those are the remaining sections. So the Economic
Yeah.
Development
So
Committee.
14 of those, we are missing 4?
Yes.
Is that-
Yes. Arguably, these are, and depending on who you talk to, arguably, these are the 4 most important sections. So they shouldn't be taken lightly. They're not being taken lightly. I'm working my way through them. So with that, yeah, so the Economic Development Committee, they've got on their work plan, so just to kind of tie that one into this, what they're going to be doing. So I sent them the economic section that I've already finished, and the next meeting upcoming, we're going to be reviewing that, seeing if they've have major changes, or yeah, we agree from an economic development standpoint. And then the other sections, they're going to be giving an opinion based on the current ordinance, or the current comprehensive plan, to say, yes, this section here makes sense to keep, based on our economic development consensus, so on and so forth, but that's really all they're gonna be doing. They're just gonna run through it, and
So you've got a draft in here
Not
of
yet.
economy, and that's what the
Yeah.
Economic Development Committee is reviewing.
right, now I'm talking about the other sections I have not done.
Okay.
So they're looking at the 2004 plan, those sections there. And they're
The
gonna
Economic
look,
Development
and they're gonna
Committee
say
is.
what's still relevant today from an Economic Development Committee perspective.
Okay.
And that's it. And mainly because if you look at the comparison of your checklist from that comprehensive plan and its review, it's completely different than today. So the data, all the maps, that's gonna be different. So the conditions portion is gonna look a lot different. The analysis probably will remain about the same, just probably, but the conditions will be different. Does that make sense?
So existing land use and future land use are obviously, for a lot of people, what you might view as the core of
Yes.
our comprehensive plan. Will the planning board be involved in that, or how do you see getting?
So, once I'm done with all this, and then, you know, the comprehensive plan committee looks it over and they say, yeah, we agree, yay, nay, go through that process, done. Then you got 2 options go down. One's a risky option, which is go through your voter approval process and then get your state approval. That's a risky process.
Well, no, I meant to help
No,
you
I-
get that section drafted, because,
They're gonna, that's an option, and then the other option is send it off to the state, and they say, here's your other recommendations, and then you go through the normal process. Those are the two options. The planning board will be a part of the recommendation process, similar to an ordinance. So they're gonna recommend or not recommend, and then go through that process there.
Well,
Does that
I'm
make
just
sense?
thinking of the nuts and bolts. That's a heavy lift for you on your own to, I mean, we've been waiting since the end of July.
I know.
I know lots of other things have been happening, and you've been working on a lot of things. I'm just trying to figure out how we get a draft done.
What I can do is I can talk with our land use attorney, see if he has any recommendations on that one way or another, but I would recommend the planning board to make a recommendation on the comprehensive plan. Nothing on the state says it's a requirement, it's more internal on what we do.
But you're talking as if we already have a comprehensive plan ready to go forward, but we don't have that yet, right?
No.
I'm talking about how we get to that point, how we
Yeah.
actually get a fully drafted comprehensive plan.
Sure. I have to finish the sections.
Okay. Tell us about your timeline.
My timeline. So I was looking at the rest of this month. I'm pretty confident I can knock out the transportation section this month. The land use, the current land use won't be difficult to write. I mean, that one's there. It's the future land use. It's going to take a little bit of theorizing. So that one I'm going to spend a decent chunk of time on, but probably March. I could say end of March is going to be my goal.
You could get both 13 and 4.
That's my goal. You know, the ordinance stuff that's done, it's on your plate now. So that's eased up a lot of my time. So now I can redirect and focus.
Okay. And public facilities and services?
Yeah.
Is that also, and I mean, are you saying end of March you'll have everything done, or?
That's my goal. I want it done more than y'all want it done.
Okay.
Y'all.
Hey, don't make fun of me.
He's from
Yeah.
Southern
No,
Maine.
I like
The
it.
Southern's coming out.
He's from Southern Maine.
Don't be son of me. Y'all are from northern Texas.
Okay, so end of March, walk us through what happens after that point
So,
then.
yeah, so that gets into that fork in the road item. We can go through and do the vote, but the problem is if the state doesn't agree, or if they say, no, you got a couple of things that are wrong, and they're more substantive, then you're gonna have to go back to the voters for another vote.
Well, don't we need a public process in town? We can't
Well,
just.
we need a public process in town, but
get
I mean,
something-
there's the public meetings that we will hold. That's a part of that review and get it to the voters process.
Mhm. So if you're not gonna have, even till the end of March, even just a draft of this plan, and then if we got a comprehensive plan committee that needs to look at it, we've got the public to look at it, we're not gonna make a June ballot, is that what you're telling us?
No,
Okay,
I don't think that's feasible
okay.
today.
In November?
I think-
November, yeah.
Would
Is
be the
November?
Next opportunity, right?
November, hands down.
And you heard tonight on
I completely
various-
agree with everybody. You
Yeah.
know, that I commend the committees that made references to they're kind of lost without a current comprehensive plan, which is
Yeah.
great to hear. I'm sorry that they're feeling lost, but at least they're saying they need that done so they can make their appropriate next steps.
Mhm.
So, good news that they're listening and reading it.
We're frustrated that we don't have it,
Hey,
is really, I guess, what I was hearing.
sure.
Okay, so we're looking at a November and end of March. So obviously, the April meeting will be pretty busy. But if we could have it, even
Sure.
independent
So
of. a
what
meeting-
you have there, I mean, that's an unformatted draft, so.
Yeah, it needs a lot of.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of formatting stuff that'll happen along with it, and I'm careful with when I post stuff to make sure it is draft in big, because I don't want anybody saying that those are the words that are going, you know, I don't want that to be interpreted.
Yeah.
That's my work thus far, that the comp plan committee will review,
Mhm.
and then they'll do their tweaks, and then it'll continue on its process.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I maybe just offer a question or a thought? I think it would be helpful, or whoa, sorry, Jeff, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
my
I'm
job
like
to do
Brent, I'm
Yeah, we get
one of those
sloppy in
guys.
this late meeting.
Wake up, Jeff. I think it would be helpful at this point to pick those two paths
Yeah.
now. Because while I've lived on both sides of that fork in the road. I've done it both ways in towns I've been in, and you know, I think it's easier to send it before, because frankly the things that most of our residents care about are not things that Inland Fisheries and Wildlife really cares about. They want to make sure that it's this map of this date as opposed to the map that we have. I think you can do two things at once. That's my recommendation to the board. But secondly, I think that for all the things we heard tonight, and I think what we're hearing is that we had a great effort and great outreach for trying to reach out to people and get them engaged. And now we are going to have to give them just as good of an effort to have outreach and keep them engaged about what we found. So maybe, I think if the direction is from the board to say, as soon as we have the draft that's representative, you know, not final draft, because final draft makes it sound like it's what's voted on, but the last working draft, I suppose, that we can move forward and feel good about, that we send that off to our friends in Augusta. But concurrently, and I think personally, more importantly, that public effort, the meetings at the Opera House, the meetings at, you know, Simon's Corner Hall, the meetings at the church in West Rockport, that sort of effort is what is going on in the meantime, right? So If June is not in focus and November is, there's an effort through the summer, early fall, maybe even late spring, really, to try to, this is what we found, this is what we have. So that way, it's not an unknown as it is now. I mean, it'll be drafted, you'll know what's in it. But part of the reason why I think so many people point to the 2004 plan is not because it's the greatest comp plan ever written. Sorry, people who were on that plan. Sorry, Jeff. But it was because people felt like they were listened to and heard. So if we can provide that type of effort, and we've got a number of different instances recently where people are trying to reach out and trying to talk to people, trying to reach different groups of people. I think that's, if we can do that and put together that type of effort, and what I'm doing is I'm saying to Ryan, put together that type of effort and lay out that plan when this is done, then I think that might help to explain that sort of end of, well, I guess it's April, because that's by the time the meeting will happen. April through to November, this is what the path looks like for public engagement.
Okay.
And making sure people are, so that, we know, largely this group knows even before they put that was the best part about the 2004 comp plan, is we knew it was gonna pass before it even, because everyone had already seen it and everyone had already said what they didn't like, said what they did like, it got all thrown in the mix. There were still some things that didn't work out, but at least it has this legend because of people we're talked to, not because of what it says on the page. So that would be my maybe suggestion, is if that's where we focus our efforts on this. It's less about what's on the page, I think, than it is that as a community, there's a feeling that we've bought into, that comprehensive vision. So maybe that if that's part and parcel with the next draft, there's almost a 15th chapter, which is how we're going to get from this being a draft to the voters.
Sure.
Does that sound?
Sounds good.
Does that help the board understand sort of maybe how we could get there? I mean, if you don't want to do that, if you want to wait until after and have it go to the state, that's fine too. Here's the downside of that. The downside is we approve it, then we send it to Augusta, and they say, oh, that chart on page 85 has to be this instead of that. We have to go back and have the voters vote on it again.
Yeah, I think the
Which is
only
crazy.
reason we were thinking of doing it that way is our time kept eroding away, because
Yeah.
we were trying to target a June deadline.
Right.
Now that we're not, we do have the time to do it with the state first. And I guess really, to just be clear, it's not November, it's September. So it can be ready for the ballot, but.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense.
Do I understand the timeline?
So end of March.
End of March.
Ryan's gonna have
Ryan, yep.
the full draft. We can sort of at the April meeting, just say, okay.
Review it.
That's my,
review it,
yeah.
Go off to the state.
Then it goes to the comprehensive plan committee for review?
Well, that's what Orion will provide for us, is what he
Yeah.
would suggest. is,
Lay out the plan.
Lay out the plan, in terms of comprehensive plan committee, public meetings.
And then goes to the state?
No, it's going, those are parallel paths. So it
Okay.
goes to the state once Orion says this is good.
How long does it take for them to,
2 months.
okay.
So the sooner I get it to them, the better.
What are you saying at the same time? Because I swear to God, my brain is like shutting off.
I don't know why. It's a short meeting, Michael.
So it's like, while it's at the state for their review, we're presenting
Right.
what we think is gonna be approved to the
Right.
voters to talk to.
Right.
And what I'm hearing is the state's not likely to have substantive comments on,
So
you
we-
can't pick this future land use. for
Yeah.
this
Do you,
area.
do you remember in the fiscal capacity where I had highlighted some stuff, don't touch, state says keep? That's what they're gonna check. They're just making sure that you're putting in what they say.
That's
It's not hard to do, but getting certain people on board with some stuff at certain stages is a little hard to do, but it's okay.
Then have public engagement,
Yep.
reach out, all as that's
Mm-hmm.
happening.
And when you do that, you do say, but we're sending this to the state, so understand, we may get something back. We want everyone to be fully cognizant the authors of this aren't all in this room. There's some that are in Augusta, and we can't control that. But
Here's what
people
we're
understand
expecting-
that.
Here's what we're expecting will be approved, and if it isn't, we'll come back to you and let you know before we
Exactly.
put it on the ballot.
Right, right. I mean, the fundamental is, we want the big issues to be part of this,
Yes.
right? We want us all to see, these are the big issues facing us, and this is what we, whoever we are in Rockport, that's what we think. So, yeah.
That sounds logical.
Okay. Sound good to everyone? Okay, well, thanks, Orion.
Thank you.
Looks like you've got a busy couple months.
Wow.
Well, so we're on to liaison reports,
Oh. Good.
which it's hard to believe there could be other things going on than what we just dealt with in this agenda, but does anybody have a liaison report?
No, I will at the end of the month.
On purpose.
Okay. Good answer, no. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Well,
So
I would
moved.
just say,
Oh.
I know talk, sorry. No, mine's really quick. Talk amongst some of the people in the Pathways Committee is very, very enthusiastic. Once, after we had the BPI, discussion. So they're seeing some hallelujah moments in the potential for Pathways going up to the high school and on and on and on.
Good.
So
That's
there's
great.
excitement there.
Okay,
Motion to adjourn.
second. Okay. Great.
All in favor?
Oh, we should all vote on it, yeah. I think that's a unanimous vote.
Unanimous.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
That was a narrow.